motion?
I'll move to set the agenda.
Second.
All right, motion and second, all in favor? Agenda is set. All right, Miles, we still have one item on our consent agenda.
Yes, sir. We have one item on consent, and it is a resolution requesting the Gaston County Commission to appoint ADJ board member to the Belmont Planning and Zoning Board. If you recall, we put the application out and didn't get any responses from citizens in the ADJ. So therefore, this resolution kicks it back over to the Gaston County Board of Commissioners to appoint someone. They have 90 days to do that. And Mr. Hepburn did send in a few edits regarding this resolution, so we can include those edits if you would like.
And they weren't substantive, they were just, you know, in terms of like how the statute was cited.
Question on it. I remember, and this was months ago, which I'm okay with either way, because I believe we had decided that with the ETJ, it allows for city of Belmont zoning, so it was kind of advantageous for us, but do we have any update in regards to, weren't we talking about removing or actually just completely going away?
I think we indefinitely tabled that because while we made an initial step towards that, but when we did that, there was a whole can of worms and unintended consequences that were subsequently brought to our attention.
Okay.
So, and Richard can correct me if I'm, I thought we should table that indefinitely.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine.
Some of the concerns were if we were to surrender the ETJ, what would happen to the pockets of unincorporated area in Belmont proper? All of a sudden, we would have pockets of county everywhere, and I think we were going to talk to the county about that. I think there's some municipalities that don't surrender that portion of the ETJ. We just have to figure out how to word it.
Yeah, I did not talk to the county at all about that piece of it. So.
Okay.
We don't have to. I just wanted to make sure before we reach out to them that we weren't about to just completely abolish this and remove it, so.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, this just appoints a member of the ETJ that the county could select versus like the selection process of the city.
And I'm sure that Walter Dixon would appreciate this since he is currently holding over from his term until we find someone to replace him.
Well, if he doesn't want to keep doing it, I'm good.
Anything else on the consent item? Good motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, consent agenda is approved. All right, moving on to agenda, item 1. Lobbyist contract approval. Miles, would you?
Yes, sir. I'll go through that. Yes, sir. During the council retreat, this was a topic you all discussed about potentially contracting with a lobbyist to help us through the process with the state, possibly to advocate for funding through their short session, their long session, possibly coordinate with that process. You all asked that I get a short list from our local state delegation, and I spoke with them, and they gave me Mr. Mike Hager with Hager Strategic Solutions, and then I met with Mr. Hager, and of course he welcomed the chance to work with Belmont on this effort. I introduced him to the mayor last week, and so I feel that it's advantageous to go ahead and contract with Hager Strategic Solutions, given that the state is moving into their short session, I think April the 24th. And so Mr. Hager can start working on our behalf to coordinate that effort with the state. Mr. Hager is in attendance on the front row, and he would like to come to the podium and introduce himself and then talk through this process with you all.
Thank you, Council. Mr. Mayor, it was good meeting you last week, and Miles, thank you. Appreciate you guys having me. I don't know if it says my resume, you guys have a copy of my resume. You ex-politicians love to talk about themselves, so I'll answer any of those questions. But I am a native of Gaston County, born and raised in South Gastonia School of Hunter Huss, but y'all hold that against me. So it's, you guys were on the far side of the county for me. So, but I do have a daughter that was born here, born and raised in Belmont. So we appreciate it. I do live in Rutherford County now. I do have a farm up there, but Miles and I were just talking about finding a place to locate me here since traffic's gotten bad between Rutherford County and Gaston County. But I do appreciate it, guys. You know, people ask me what I do for a living. I tell them I'm a consultant. I don't tell them I'm a lobbyist. Everybody asks me why I do that. I said, well, if you look on the list of most admired jobs, you know, you've got nun and doctor and city council member and mayor and, you know, social worker. And then if you look down where lobbyist is, it's usually terrorist, serial killer, you know, lawyer, places down there. you get it up there.
Well, I'm an attorney. So
Yeah, you get that right.
Yes.
So thank you guys. So I get to talk about what I do now, which is kind of nice. You know, what we do to help you guys is, as you know, the easiest one is the appropriations from the general fund. And those can be targeted, non-targeted, and the general fund loves to give money for infrastructure. That usually occurs at the end of the budget process. When money's got handed out, they fund all the big things, and they fund the cities and counties after that. And then, of course, the other thing we do is help you with legislation. If you need local legislation, if you want to be part of statewide legislation, we can help you with that. One thing we've done, and Miles may remember this, we helped one local towns with some bad legislation that's going through. It's going to hurt them. It would hurt you guys also. So because I was known to be associated with that town, I was asked to help stop that. And it was brought to me and said, I know, Mike, you know this town, will you kind of help us with it? So we got it stopped, and so we can do that also. But the most important thing we do is to get you guys relationships. And you've got a good relationship with Representative Loftus, probably Senator Over Cash. But then you need to know the upcoming speaker, Representative Hall out of Caldwell County. You need to know the guy who took my place as majority leader, Representative Bell out of Greene County, who's moving up to be the rules chair. The rules chair is important because that's who lets legislation move. And then we need to get to know, especially Representative Sane out of Lincoln County, because he's the chief appropriations chair. So that's what we can do for you guys. That's what I'll do for you guys. And you know, there's a lot of ins and outs we can do with this. We can have, for instance, appropriated money targeted for a sewer line or a water line. Then we can do main street funds that are unencumbered. You can use them for any way you want. So there's a whole myriad of things we can do for you guys. I just need to know what your priority list is, right? Miles, we're asking for priority list pretty quick. And so we'll need to know those fairly quick once we get started. So anyway, any questions you guys have, I'll be happy to stand for them. Yes,
what other municipalities in the area do you represent?
I don't represent any one. My daughter represents Mount Holly.
Okay.
We bifurcated that issue, and so I don't represent any, and I won't represent another one in Gaston County.
Okay.
So that's kind of our ethics issue. She won't represent another. She can't help me with here, and I can't help her with there. We bifurcate those things. I don't know what she's doing, and she doesn't know what I'm doing.
It makes sense, because I think for me, it's like, you know, we're all competing, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
you know, I just wanted to make sure, you know, we do have that priority.
Yeah, you guys, she won't know what I'm working on for you guys or who I'm talking to, and I won't know what she's working on.
It's an ethical wall.
Yeah, and you have to have that. Even to the fact we're probably going to separate Belmont into a different LLC, because I don't want any mixture of dollars all either. So that's just a safe way to do it.
And I guess the only other question, I mean, I guess just take your word for it, but do you have general, like, pretty good relationships with the folks at the General Assembly and things like that?
Yeah, I say cool, I apologize.
No.
I'm just talking about Belmont. Cool thing about what I do is, I served in the General Assembly for 6 years. I was the majority leader. So almost every person in leadership down there, whether the House or Senate, are friends of mine. Representative Sane, I've known each other 20 years. Representative Bell, the majority leader, is getting ready to be the rules chairman. I promoted him to that job. Representative Destin Hall, I helped him get elected. So we know these guys. I go to dinner with them when I'm downtown, when I'm down there.
Okay.
And I want you guys to go too. If you're down, if you want to come down, go with me, get to meet the folks. I'd encourage that.
Cool, thank you.
Anything else?
No questions?
Pretty easy. I appreciate that.
So Mayor, there's a contract that's included inside the agenda packet.
Miles, you need me on to sit down, you know?
No, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Heffern did send in a few corrections to that contract as well, where we could add these corrections to the actual agreement with no problem. And just like Mr. Hager had mentioned, that, you know, the next step in the process is for me to provide Mr. Hager with the actual CIP list for both the enterprise fund and for the general fund. We're thinking about the process to actually rank them to determine what to ask the state for, and Mr. Hager can start that process as far as like coordinating the visits and what time we're going to be in certain people's offices, and the one page you leave behind, the one page flyer, description, all that kind of stuff will fall under Mr. Hager's contract as well.
What edits did you make, Jim?
Like grammatical.
Okay.
I made make sure we spelled Miles' name correctly. That's the second contract in which it's been spelled incorrectly.
He got that right, I mentioned that, so Miles is spelled correctly now on the new contract, but these other corrections are not in there.
All right, so you're looking for a motion to approve the contract with the pending edits?
Yes, sir.
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a motion to
Second.
approve. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 2, I-85 Widening Project, Betterments, and Belmont Abbey College funding participation.
Yes, sir. This is another item that has been out, I guess in the community, most municipal communities for quite some time. And this is regarding the I-85 widening project. And so you know that they're widening I-85, it's a widening I-85 from exit 26, in between 26 and 27, all the way to 321. During this project, they're going to be taking the bridges. Some of the bridges will be widened, some of them will be relocated to another area. And so they've asked the municipalities if they want to have any betterments associated with the widening project. Some of the betterments that may include medallions on the actual bridges, some precast work that could enhance the bridge, similar to what you've been on the 74 bypass around Monroe. You can see that there's a lot of improvements on those bridges. There's mast arm poles and lights for the traffic signals. That black powder coated arms and poles is an upgrade. There's certain improvements for lighting, light poles, and I think for this exit 26, I think there's 2 roundabouts. And so they're proposing some roundabout improvements as well. It also includes ornamental fencing along the P&N spur and the multi-use path, pedestrian lighting on the multi-use path and on the P&N bridge, and then an enhanced interchange landscaping. So all these betterments come up to a total of $3,084,000. NCDOT will participate in that cost at the cost of $943,000. So the cost of the city of Belmont is around $2.1 million. NCDOT and the MPO have been really pushing on municipalities to go ahead and lock in some of these contracts, the agreement, so that when the project hits, the design build firm can, they'll know what improvements to actually include with the project moving forward. And so then I was talking to staff recently about putting this on the agenda, and a staff member actually mentioned that at some time in the past, I think during the city council retreat in 2023, I think this project was discussed, and it kind of showed some of the improvements that the renderings, there's no really design right now, it's just the renderings of what the improvements may look like. And they stated to me that I think that you all had directed, council had directed staff to approach the Belmont Abbey College to determine if there was any participation in this kind of funding effort. And so I went to the Abbey on February 29th, and I met with Alan Mark. He's the Executive Vice President for Administration, Finance, and Operations. Mr. Bill Monroe is also in the audience. He was there. He's with Steelwood Solutions, and that's the property development consultant for Belmont Abbey College. And Mr. Richard Hoffling, he's the attorney at law with the Terry Law Firm. They were all in attendance, and we had a good conversation about what this project is and what the ask was of us. Did they want to participate in any kind of funding? And so they appreciated that. I guess they had the opportunity to weigh in on it, but they asked could they attend the council meeting to kind of talk through this with you all. And so I asked Mr. Monroe to be here along with several other folks, but I think Mr. Alan Mark had a previously scheduled meeting at this time that he could not get out of. So Mr. Monroe is here on behalf of Belmont Abbey College. So Mr. Monroe, if you'd like to step up to the microphone and if you want to discuss any of the betterments and what maybe the Abbey on their side have talked internally since I left the meeting in February, and any kind of discussions are, I guess, open at this point.
Okay, yeah, and Alan Mark and Rich Hofling are in very serious financial meeting over at the college, studying the college's finances, meeting with what they have as a financial advisory committee, which is in place. And there was no way for him to get here. He thought he could get here, but he's just tied up. I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the financial advisory committee and the board of directors in this meeting. So you get me instead. I'm a retired architect, retired land planner, licensed real estate broker, real estate consultant, and a property manager. My only client is the monastery. And to let you know the separation there, for those of you who don't know, all the land, including all the college, is owned by the Southern Benedictine Society, a Benedictine monastery. They started here exactly 148 years ago with a boys' school, and they have continued to educate young men and young women for the last 148 years. Part of their reason for being is education, and the only thing they have available to them to finance that is the land and how the land is utilized. They are not part of the Catholic diocese. Some people think they are, but it's just the land. We've developed a strategy over the last 32 years that I have been involved with them to only do land leases or to do joint venture projects with people we know very well. For instance, the Carstarfin family out in McCannville are our partners in the Hampton Inn Hotel. So I take care of all that for them. Just wanted you to know that background. The monastery basically owns everything. Their reason for being is to support the college. They do have different budgets. Most of the money seems to flow from the monastery to the college, but they both have their own budgets. What we talked to Miles about, and he had sent us the agreement that NCDOT has sent to you, and we're in agreement to support things. The good thing about the agreement is you don't know anything until the improvements are completed. So both the monastery and the college are going to budget $50,000 per year towards this project, looking at a total of $500,000, $250 from the monastery, $250 from the college. And that, with everything else that's going on financially right now, is the best they can offer at this point. Now, we've got one but, and I think Miles probably has the same but. We don't know what the betterments are. You know, we're seeing pictures of the Monroe bypass. Is Tiffany here? Tiffany and I have attended several meetings with NCDOT, over the last 4 years, yes, at least, and have worked out many things with them to get to this point. But they are proceeding under a design-build process. And once they select a contractor to do the project, that contractor is responsible for the design. So we want to be able to approve the design before we hand over the money, and I assume you want to do the same thing. What concerns us is how long this is already drug out. I mean, by the first meeting I had with NCDOT, the project would be finished this year, and they haven't even selected a contractor. So we're concerned about the process, when it will start. This is a lump sum agreement, so those funds in value may come down with inflation, and what none of us want to end up is spending $3 million on something that doesn't look very good. And we won't know that for several months. So we would endorse the city agreeing to the contract if you have the other funds available, knowing that we both have 5 years minimum, maybe 6, to get to those numbers. And we will, put in our $500,000 from the two organizations to help with the project. Any questions I can help you with?
Well, you answered a couple of mine, being, just to clarify, from my reading of the contract, that this was the money wasn't due until the project is finished, but it's due all at once at that time.
And that's why we're setting aside
Yeah.
an annual budget to
Mhm.
build up to that reserve.
And it's a fixed cost, so it's not going to, we're locked in if we were to agree to this in some form or fashion, but the value of what we get for that money might decrease, diminish over time. I have a feeling it might.
Yeah.
And that's my concern.
Yeah.
Right, so, even since this draft contract, this dated October 23rd has been issued to us, or October the 5th, 2023, was issued, the state has postponed the letting of the project once again because, the way I understand it, the I-26 widening project came in way over budget, therefore, they've delayed the let, for this project as well. So I just want to state that even though this contract states 2030 is the timeframe for construction to be complete, that was based on a schedule they had before. Now that has pushed, I don't know what the end date for the new, contract would be, but, I can imagine that if they're pushing the let date, then the back end's probably gonna be pushed a little bit too, so it could be past the 2030, due date for the actual, funds. The thing is, if you, I guess a positive for, going ahead and execute the contract today is that the items that are listed in the contract will change. And so I imagine the price points for some of these things may go up. That doesn't mean that they're gonna diminish the things that you want to do because they're listed out, in this Exhibit A, and it pretty much states the exact things that they're gonna build, for the Betterments. So I just wanted to point that out.
So who would cover the cost in that scenario? Would NCDOT then have to be on the hook for paying more, right?
I assume, if the cost of the municipality is set, then somebody else is going to have to cover, the remaining portion. That's the way I understand it, the way it's kind of written and laid out.
And I agree with that interpretation. That's our understanding also, that this is a lump sum that's being committed for a list of betterments.
So while we agree that that may be the case, what do the lawyers say? Do they confirm that?
Well, our attorney does.
Okay.
I'm not sure about your attorney.
I'm not sure that's been totally reviewed.
So the one thing we know will remain constant is the wish list, we just don't know the dollar amount.
Well, the contract says this is the fixed
I was about to
cost.
say, Jim's point, it sounds like our cost is not.
Now, I don't know whether that means is, all right, you get $2.1 million worth of stuff in 2024 dollars, and if that gets you less stuff in 2030, then you get less stuff. But the way I read the contract is that's not going to, like, when we sign, if we were to sign this contract for everything that's in the contract, we are locked in, that price cannot change.
That's good. That's what I understand.
And we do have, exhibits from NCDOT to date, that we both can use when we get to the final negotiation on the design improvement.
But it's just weird to me that, we're talking about the costs aren't due until completion. Completion's not envisioned for 6 years down the road, maybe 7, who knows? Like, that's yeah. And considering the way things, and we all know regrettably how construction especially costs and everything can skyrocket.
Let's just look at the facts, right? They're always over budget when they're coming to these types of improvements. Now, is it these things that are aesthetically pleasing, or is it something else? I don't know. But they're always over budget. That's what they always say at NPO.
Yeah.
So
It's just, I'm just, I don't know, dubious or wary of the fact that there's such a gap, that there's no way these things are going to cost this amount when the time comes.
And the way the design build would work is that you've got a design build contractor. That's why there's no plans, because it's kind of designed and built at the same time. Therefore, if and there's no set schedule on start here and end here. They could start, on the exit 26 first, and do that one first. Therefore, the numbers will be closer to, what this estimate is versus like wait till the very end of the contract to do something. And I've also heard that more than likely, when you're doing a big project like this, is you'll probably do all the, like the superstructures first, all the overpasses and everything. But of course, they have to widen all that out, so you want that contractor to come in and widen everything first. Therefore, more than likely, some of these things will be done kind of up front. So maybe the figures here that they've shared with us would be, close to accurate. But just the advantage of, locking in the price today, which is like, wait till something's changed and you get, draft number 2.
In our, and I'm sure we'll get to it this afternoon, but in our financial modeling, did we put this in there as a future earmark, as a future cost?
I'll have to look at, Jared and Kevin, but 2030,
I know that we were using the trying to run our software, we were plugging it in and out to see how it impacted.
Right, but I can't remember, did we keep it in or did we remove it?
I'd have to look, I think it's built in, but I think it's turned off at last year, but I'd have to double check the model on that.
The reason why I keep referencing that is because like when we use that tool, it's an awesome tool. I mean, it really is, but it really helped dictate our decisions with tax rate, right? So you think about last year, the year before last, we lowered it 2 years in a row. So you're losing, what, 250K% when we did that? So.
It's more than that now, but.
Right, well, yeah, because valuation, that makes sense. But at the time, it was like 275 or something, which the way we got that number was by turning this off, right? And then also, I think there was something with the fire department as well, with the fire station. So I just want to be cognizant of that, is that we can afford it in the future.
Well, if we turn something off, we turn something else on.
No, right,
Vice
because
versa.
the turn on to offset that was lowering the tax rate. So our tax rate's here, the expense was here or whatever, and then you turn this off and then you lower it as well. So there was no like turn on, turn off. So I just want to be, again, kind of weary of that. Because I remember when we were discussing this, the council at the time, it was just, we didn't know if it was really needed, right? If the value that we're going to spend on this is what we really thought was going to be a value add to the community itself.
I think that's my question, is do we need this?
Well, from an image viewpoint, speaking as an ex-designer, it will put that exit on the map.
Mm-hmm.
It will be a very unique thing that people will recognize. That's the gateway to Belmont, and to some degree, the gateway to the college.
Mm-hmm.
So from an image and branding, if you will, perspective, we liked the idea, and we went out and drove the Monroe Bypass. Those are very nice structures, I must admit. So should we get something like that, I think it's a benefit to the town's image and a benefit to the college's image too. Whether that raises any money for you, I have no idea.
No,
It would look good. It would look good.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day.
And we're very glad that you guys are coming to the table.
At the end of the day, it's
because
all
I
about
would never
image.
thought about that.
Exactly, I mean, Belmont's growing without it, so do we need it?
I mean, there's some things in here.
When you're on the
That-
interstate, do you?
Jim, wasn't there levels, right?
Yeah, there was like a high level and a mid level. Of course, there wasn't a low. Remember, the only options were high and mid. There wasn't a low.
Yeah.
But I don't, I can't remember. I thought we went for the mid, but I didn't want to go in.
Yes, so I asked the MPO today, about what does the betterment description, the first one, quantity one, it says interchange, aesthetic, betterment.
Yeah.
I said, what does that include? And their response to me today states that the upgrades to the bridge structure itself for exit 26. Belmont has selected the high-end betterments for this structure, which includes a brick form liner with 3 brick colors and natural mortar on the bridge elements and walls, stain for the girders, columns, and wing walls at end vents, 6 medallions, and a street name. So that's what, item, the first bullet point, as stated. That's the one quantity for Commonsville municipality at $598,130.30.
Well,
Do you remember that?
I remember talking about it at the retreat, and that seemed to be the consensus, and not agreeing with that personally, but I remember there was some sort of consensus about one of the options.
Well, I think, and again, I think we already, and we can kind of negotiate, because obviously, Charlie, you're new. It's unfortunate Catherine and Jason are here, because they're also new from this perspective, but whatever we budgeted for in that financial sheet, as far as I'm concerned, was our decision back then, right? Because I think we had these conversations, we broke it down, and we said yes or no. Now, it sounds like we just said no, because if we turned it off, we said no, right? Because we were looking at cash flows for years out. What's that coming?
Are you trying to say something?
Well, what I was just gonna say is on the mid-tier was for the landscaping portion. If you remember, it was one of the top tier for the improvements on the side. But we picked the mid-tier for the landscaping. I don't know if that was still an option, Miles, or not.
For the interchange landscaping betterment, it says enhanced
Okay.
on this document here.
So it's like, we really don't know what we're paying for, right?
Well, it's the enhanced option, it's the betterments that I just called out.
It was like the brick veneer, right, on the overchange, or excuse me, the bridge.
But they can't give you like an actual drawing of what that is because there's no drawing yet. So they tell you what they kind of give you a description, and then during the description, the design builders will like design what that thing looks like. So it's just in words right now, it's kind of hard to visualize when they not just write it out for you, but it's like, here's what the enhanced is, here's what like the mid-grade is.
And remind me, who's responsible, again, for maintenance of the betterment, so like the roundabout, I think there was gonna be like some greenery and stuff, like, was it us, or?
Yeah, this is, inside the contract, item D, maintenance. The department shall be responsible for all traffic operating controls and devices which shall be established, enforced, installed, maintained in accordance with NCDOT or North Carolina general statutes. The municipality shall maintain the interchange landscaping, black powder coated metal pole, mast arms and signals, ornamental fencing, parapet lighting on the pin-in spur, line bridge, and roundabout center island betterments, which include but are not limited to the 10-foot wide standing stained concrete cap, landscaping, which is plantings and irrigation system, and under drain system. So those are all the things that the municipality
Yeah.
is responsible for.
Because I remember one of the concerns was, which is hard to understand, but what's the ongoing cost to maintain this stuff, right? Because so it's not just the $3 million or 2.1. Then we've got cost in perpetuity to maintain these areas of betterment. And if that's just the municipality upholding that, and I'm assuming like the Abbey would also kick into that potentially, but, I mean, again, we don't do that today. So if we don't do that today, you gotta think that's probably gonna be additional staff. And
Still additional money on about staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think they just added to their, well, at least with the roundabout landscaping and whatnot, I would assume they just added to their route or, daily, routine, but, I can't speak to the black powder coated metal poles and mast irons. I don't know if we have any.
I may be
I think we've all seen them somewhere. The mass arms.
Yeah, it's kind of like the downtown, those are one at the intersection of Cobb and Main, that's a black, pole and, mast arm that kind of goes across the intersection and it holds a light. I don't know if it's black powder coated or whatever that flute may be at the bottom where the pole comes up. But that's a similar style, like mast arm, signal device.
So let me see if I understand this correctly. Okay, so right now, the DOT is wanting us to commit contractually to these betterments at this price. What they can't tell us is that when they finally let this project and it goes to construction, what the cost could be in 7 years. All right, but we're locked in for $3 million, and then, 6, 7 years from now, is DOT gonna come back to us and redline the back coating, the fencing? We're gonna see, so I'm worried about, we're gonna see a lot of red lines through these options, and that $2 million is gonna buy us next to nothing, and we've set ourselves up then to either be where we are now with no betterments or limited betterments, or putting future council in the position of having to up the ante on this. We were somewhat contractually bound, at least in the dollar amount. You know, philosophically, this is what we want, but we don't know what we can buy 7 years from now. I mean, in a nutshell, is it kind of the scenario we're looking at?
No, I think the agreement buys you the things that are listed. I don't think they could go back and be like, no, it's $2.1 million, we'll only buy like mast arm poles now. I don't think that per contract they can, the way I read it and interpret it is that those are the things that are listed, and those are the things that they have to give you, at the end of the day. That's the way I look at it. But, you know, they're not asking like tonight, we need this agreement to be signed. I think we still have a little bit of time if you'd like to consider, thinking through it just a little bit more, maybe if you want me to ask certain questions, then I'd like to know what those are, and that way I can come back to you all when they come to me and say, hey, we're gonna let this project, we need a signature, or you're not gonna get any betterment at that time. So it'd be good to know those kind of questions, so I can, y'all need to get further answers so you can make a decision, and that's.
Well, I certainly think we should have our other two colleagues here if we're committing this kind of money.
Yeah, I also would like to see it after our budget discussions too, because I want to see it in the tool that we've established. Because again, I'm really hoping we can adopt this tool as what we use as a guidance for our financial decisions. Because again, that's what we, for the past 2 years, have based our tax rate on. So we need to make sure because in too many years we said, well, let's do that. Well, that does not align with the budget that we have previously discussed.
So my questions that I would have you ask is, you know, in terms of the first, I know you told us, Miles, what that interchange aesthetics betterment, the $598,000 entails. You know, I'd like to potentially revisit that and see if that's like the high, what's the mid. You know, it's a different council, it's a different, I think, perhaps approach. I'd have the same question for the interchange landscaping, whether there are tiers for that. I'm a little bit, less concerned because it's about half what the first item is. My other $1.6 million for these black powder coated metal pole and mast arms, to me that just.
Is that for the lights themselves, or is that for the lights to be black powder coated?
I just like.
I think it's like the black powder coating and metal.
It's the metal pole with the mast.
Right. There's gonna be lights, they're gonna put the lights.
That's what I'm saying, so we're paying 1.6 to have the lights, but basically, to spray black powder coat on.
Something, I don't quite understand
Right,
it, but it seems like,
Okay, so the lights are already gonna be provided.
that's my understanding.
I'm assuming like the black powder coat is like an upgrade, because if you just think about it kind of like aesthetically and stuff, that's usually like an option. So
The powder coating, anything extends its life. And that's one of the things that it does protect the metal. But let's go ahead, Miles asked for questions. Let's go ahead and round that out and give that to him and decide, are we gonna revisit this?
Yeah.
When, May, workshop, or council meeting?
I'd like to get a better idea when NCDOT actually needs the actual agreement. They give me like a drop dead date. They had a drop dead date, but then they moved everything on us on the past month, so, better idea when they actually need this thing signed would help me out a lot.
All right, so are there any other particular questions that he needs from the council?
yeah, just one more. Maybe let's just look into to see like what is it going to cost us in regards to maintaining some of these areas, right? Because we gotta understand that cost because again, I think you're gonna need additional staff to go out there and do this, because these, if you think about it, driving down these interstates, these are large areas, right? That are gardened, so.
Well, as Alex alluded to, myself, Jason, and Catherine weren't on city council, so I don't know what the mid-tier and the budget-friendly tiers are, so I think for me, speaking for Catherine and Jason, it might be helpful to see what those other tier options were. On all of
In
this.
terms of what is
Yeah.
offered, obviously,
Yeah.
apparently, we're not able to see anything until.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You can
Put
see
your
the
creative
table.
hat on, Charlie. Imagination.
That's all. Do you have any other questions for Mr. Monroe?
No, I mean, I appreciate,
Yeah.
y'all's, commitment, and I think we're aligned on a lot of this, the approach,
I would ask for one thing, and I think it's something you should do anyway, but should this proceed at the high betterment, I would ask that Miles negotiates into that an Exhibit A that is the picture of what we expect that they actually sent us. And secondly, just the right to review the final design for both of our investments.
Yes.
I think those should be in the contract before you sign it.
Let me ask you this, Miles, with the design build, right? Oh, sorry. With the design build, do you pay before they start the designing, or do we pay after they complete the design on
We
it? Right?
pay when the construction is completed.
When construction is completed. Okay,
Yes,
so
well,
at any
after.
point in time, we can back out. If they send us a design that's not up to our standards, we can back out on it, right?
If we put that clause into the contract.
Yeah, I don't know about the backing out piece, and when you can back out, if you sign it, and then they go forward with like designing it, I don't know if you can like back out.
See, that's what I'm curious.
Well,
Well, if you maintain the right to review the design,
mhm.
then you have that opportunity, Parks could work on that language to be able to back out.
Assuming they'd agree with it.
Right, assuming they agree to it.
Yeah, because otherwise, it's a pretty short contract, all things considered, but, if otherwise it could be potential breach on our part, and the damages at a minimum would be what they've incurred in reliance on the design that they undertook, because we signed the contract according to, agree to all that.
So maybe that's my last question, and there's understanding at what point in time can we back out, or time can we back up to? Because again, if they come back with a design, and this is what your $2 or your $3 million is worth, and both parties don't agree to it, I don't want us to be locked in for $2.1 million to it.
There's nothing that, sometimes there's a liquidated damages provision that would say, in the event of a breach, what the damages would be, but I don't see that. It's a pretty short contract. But it just doesn't, I don't know, it just seems like there's going to be extra costs, perhaps significant, depending on when construction is completed versus when the contract was entered, and it just seems like I don't know why it would be, somebody's gonna have to incur that risk.
Well, in the process, they will design something that's a $10,000 to $25,000 amount they're committed to doing, and we would just reserve the right to be able to approve that design for the funding, which is 5 or 6 years out.
Which shall not be unreasonably withheld, blah, 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 blah,
But if they come back with a standard bridge and say costs have gone up so much, we need that money for a standard bridge, then we both need to get out of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so Miles, does that give you enough direction?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then it'll be, I guess, at your discretion, once you're satisfied, when you bring it back.
Yes, sir.
All right, then let's move on to item 3, the MAPS group, classification and pay setting.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. In 2023, the city retained MAPS group to conduct a classification and compensation study. Tonight, we have Ms. Erica Phillips here. She's going to be walking you through the process, the findings of the study, and she'll be available to answer any questions you have. Oh, thank you.
my name is Erica Phillips. I'm with the MAPS Group. I have been with the MAPS Group for about 8 years, full-time for the last 3. I have been in states and local human resources government for 29 years. I retired a couple years ago. And there were a couple of different consultants that worked with me on this project. So Cheryl Brown did, and Susan Nunn as well, but I'm representing all of us here today. So the MAPS Group has been around since 1983. We have consultants all across the state, and we partner with all kinds of public employers. We only do public employment partnerships, and we do a variety of HR services depending on what the organization may want. We do a lot of classification and pay studies. Lately, with the way the market's been the last few years, that's what we get a lot of calls for. We also do personnel policy development. So we'll take an organization's personnel policy and we'll update it, or we'll create one for them if they don't have one. A lot of times we'll do that as part of class and pay study. We'll do assessment centers, so if an organization is looking to hire, typically it's a department head level or manager position, we will help them with recruiting for that position and sometimes do full selection process design for them. And if they want to do an assessment center, we'll do that as well. We'll do all kinds of training. If there's supervisory training that an organization is looking for their employees, performance evaluation training, we'll do that as well. We'll do employee engagement surveys if someone's looking for that. And if you have a vacancy in your human resources department, we can fill in that area as well. And actually, Cheryl Brown is serving as the HR director right now for Asheville while they're trying to fill their position. So clients, this is just an example. We work with all sizes. We try to stay under 400 employees. There are other organizations out there that work with larger organizations that have over 400 employees. So I've done organizations as small as 5 employees up to a couple years ago we did Salisbury, and that was one of our larger employers that we work with. And we do a lot of counties as well. We'll also do nonprofits. I recently did the Dunn Housing Authority and the Outer Banks Visitors Bureau. So I've really worked from all across the state. I've truly been from Murphy to Manio in the last few years, doing all kinds of HR services. So what is a class and pay study? I kind of like to think of it as 2 different sides of a coin. So we'll come in and we look at the positions on one side of the coin. And a lot of times I'll say positions, and I might mean classifications, job titles. On the other side of the coin, we're looking at the compensation that goes with that classification or that position. So we're looking at the position and the pay. We're taking the positions and we look at them internally, compare them to all the other positions within the organization to make sure there's internal equity in your pay plan. And we also look at external equity as well, and that's looking at the market to see what other organizations are paying similar positions that you have here in the city. We also look at the pay practices that you may have, and a lot of times that's part of the personnel policy, as far as where you hire new employees, how you move them throughout your ranges, how you might have educational incentive pay, all different kinds of pay practices that you might have. And then we will write new job descriptions, or we call them class specifications. So you'll have those, and that's helpful for human resources and the organization and the employer to have updated job descriptions. So the primary goal of a study is to make sure that the city's pay plan is in line with the market, that you're competitive, that you're able to recruit the applicants that you want so that you can consider good qualified applicants for your positions. You can retain the employees that you have now. Obviously, employees leave for a lot of different reasons. It's not just pay, but you don't want pay to be one of them. So you don't want someone to jump to a neighboring town or organization because they can make $5,000 or $6,000 more, and that may be the only reason that they're leaving. So you want to make sure your pay plan is competitive in the market. And it also is helpful for the employees to know that you are considering their pay, and you want to make sure that your pay plan is competitive, that their pay is competitive in the market. So why do a classification study? There's a lot of different reasons why an organization might do one. You might have new technology that comes in and changes the positions. Say, for example, you might have some new meter reading software, some new financial software that changes the way your employees do their work. You might have new services that you're providing. I imagine with the rec center, which by the way is one of the most beautiful buildings I think I've been in a municipality. That is just a very beautiful facility that you have over there. But I'm sure with that new facility, you're offering new programming. You have employees that are doing some different things as far as scheduling. So I'm sure there were some changing duties for the positions that work over there in the rec center. You might have reorganization in a department. If you have an employee that retires or leaves, you might decide to shift some of those duties in that department, which might then change the position, some of their primary duties. So you might have changes over time in those positions in those departments. In addition, the market changes at different rates for different jobs. So obviously, over the last few years, the market's changed for all positions. It's the highest it's been in the last 40 years. So we're seeing all across the state market issues. But there are also some positions that sometimes, depending on what's going on in the market, those positions might change and might be a little bit more harder to recruit for at any given time. So we're seeing a lot of that in law enforcement right now. There's significant increases in law enforcement pay because it's harder to recruit for some of those positions for a variety of reasons. Also, if you have a lot of development going on in your area, you might be losing, if you have building code inspectors, sometimes that's a hard one to recruit for if you've got a lot of growth and development in that area as well. It's helpful to have your recruitment process, having updated job descriptions, having accurate pay that's competitive in the market helps you recruit good candidates for that. So it's always helpful for the recruitment process. We also look to make sure in your pay plan that we have equal pay for equal work. So we're looking in that internal equity, making sure that positions are in comparable pay grades so it meets the requirements of equal pay for equal work. Updating your compensation philosophy, if that's something that you want us to do, usually again as part of the personnel policy. And then we also are looking at legal compliance and FLSA, so we'll make recommendations on if a position should be exempt or non-exempt. And then we do write in the job description sections for ADA and OSHA, which is helpful for a lot of different reasons. So there's a lot of different reasons why you might want to do a classification study and why an organization may reach out to us to update theirs. So when we do a cost and pay study, these are the steps that we typically go through. So obviously the organization will reach out to us, identify the need to do that, which you all reached out to us this past summer and said you wanted to update your pay plan, do a cost and pay study. Then we'll come into the organization and we'll do employee orientation meetings. So we'll have several different meetings where the employees can come, we'll talk to them about what a cost and pay study is, talk to them about the steps, what's going to be required of them as part of the study, and answer any questions that they may have about that study. We'll ask the employees to fill out position questionnaires. That helps us when we come back and interview them about their positions. It also helps us write those job descriptions for the positions. And then we'll be coming back and doing some interviews with the employees. We don't necessarily meet with every single employee, but we do want to meet with at least one employee in every job classification. And any employee that wants an interview, if they feel like they might be doing something a little bit different from some of the others. So, for example, we didn't have to interview every firefighter, but we wanted to make sure we at least had one or two firefighters that could talk about those positions as a whole. Then we'll be doing the analysis on our end. Once we have a lot of that information from the employees, we'll be doing our market, our salary survey, and gathering all the data so that we can do that external equity comparison. We'll put together some analysis and write a draft report, go over that with management to see if they feel like we captured everything, were we missing anything, and we'll do a final report and then obviously implement that and present to the board. We did things a little differently because we wanted to make sure you all had the numbers in time for the budget. So some of the information that we would present at the end as far as the job descriptions, we're still working on finalizing the personnel policies. Some of that will be coming a little bit later. So these are the steps that we go through. When we come and do the employee orientation meetings with the employees, this is some information that we like to share with them because sometimes they might have different ideas of what we might be looking at when we come and do the study. So we do tell the employees that when you do a study, pay increases are not guaranteed. So a lot of times you might find in an organization that the pay ranges are where they need to be for certain positions, and individual employee pay is where it needs to be in those pay ranges. So just because we're coming to do a study doesn't mean that all the employees are going to get a pay increase. Sometimes that might be a misconception. We do tell them, though, that we never recommend pay decreases. So if there's a situation where a position we might determine that there might need to be a lower salary grade for that, we would never recommend an individual employee receive a pay decrease. There's ways to move a salary range up so it can catch up to the employee if that happens. We do talk to them about the fact that we're not looking at eliminating any positions. We also don't come in, we're not recommending any kind of reorganization or restructuring. I recently had a town reach out and they wanted us to come in and interview all the employees and make some decisions on what positions positions that they needed to have there, which could be eliminated, and I told them that's just not something that we do, so. And of course, anything that we recommend are just recommendations. Obviously, any of the changes that might come out of the study, we recommend to management, and then it's subject to council and management approval. So the study is not about individual employees and their work performance, how well they're doing their jobs, how many people are doing their jobs. It's truly just about the jobs themselves, the positions, and then the pay that goes with that, corresponding pay. So once we do the employee orientation meetings, we have the employees fill out the questionnaire. This is just something that we go over with them. We ask them to list their major duties, if they could give us an idea of the percentage of time they spend in some of those duties. Sometimes we'll get a lot of information. We'll get 6 pages of information. Sometimes we just get a couple sentences. So it is helpful that we come back and meet with the employees one-on-one and delve into their job duties so we get a better idea of what they do. And once we have all the information from the employees, we meet with the department heads as well, so we can talk to them about the positions in their department. And then we start our internal analysis on our end, where we look at the positions and we look at these different classification factors. So these are things that we're looking at within positions, and we compare the positions to each other based on some of these classification factors. So we want to know what kind of education, training, certification, license, or even work experience might be required to do the position. So not what the individual employee may have, but what would be required if you were recruiting for that position or be advertising that at the time. Some positions, you may be able to bring someone in as a trainee and train them in that role. Others, you might need to truly come in with some work experience or certain kinds of education. Obviously, with law enforcement, they're going to need the BOET certification, firefighter certification. We're also looking at the complexity of the work that the position performs, the variety of work. So are they primarily focused on doing one thing throughout the day, or might they have 5, 6, 7 things that they're responsible for that they have to do throughout the day? And then how complex are those things? Are they making certain decisions? Are there several steps they have to go through to finish that work? Any kind of problem solving that they might have to do on the job, in the role, and independence of action. In that area, we're looking for, are they working maybe alongside a supervisor? So maybe in one department you have employees that may be part of a crew, and so they have a crew leader, supervisor that's working alongside them that says, well, let's work on this now, let's shift, let's work on that. Or are they out in the field making some decisions, monitoring their time, making sure they get their work done throughout the day? So what kind of independence do they have with their work throughout the day? Responsibility for resources. Resources can be other staff, so are they supervising, are they responsible for that staff, making sure that they're completing their work and they're doing it safely. Could be financial resources. Do they have their own budget that they're monitoring, or certain line items within the budget? Could be facilities, if they have responsibility for certain facilities or certain kinds of equipment. So that can be a lot of different things as far as resources. So we talk to them about those and what kind of responsibility they have for those. Are they maybe ordering that kind of equipment? Are they making sure it's getting preventive maintenance, any kind of repairs that might be needed? Public contact. So are they have internal contact with other employees within the organization? What kind of external public contact do they have? How much public contact? And what are they doing in that public contact? So maybe they are making reservations for a room rental, or maybe they're enforcing laws, and maybe they're having to explain certain technical guidelines and ordinances. So what are they doing in that public contact role? Again, supervision, are they responsible for supervising other employees? And then what kind of supervision? So maybe as a department head, they might be involved in interviewing, making some recommendations on who they might want to hire in that department, signing off on timesheets, dealing with disciplinary issues within their departments. Or is it more crew leader where they're alongside, they're assisting with the training of the employees, but maybe not to the level of a higher level supervisor? So what kind of supervision do they have, and what are they doing in those roles? Consequences of error. Of course, we're all human. We all make mistakes. If I make errors, usually it's a typo. It's something I can usually fix. But in other positions, the consequences of the error may be a lot greater. So looking at that risk exposure that these positions have. And then the working conditions, and that could be mental demands, it could be hazards of the job. Are they working out in the elements? Are they crawling in their houses? So looking at all those things, and so this is what we call classification factors. And We take those positions, once we meet with the employees, we have the written questionnaire about their job, we have the information that they gave us from the interviews, and we're looking at these classification factors and comparing them to try to find positions that somewhat equal value within the organization comparison. These are not classification factors, so we're not looking at volume of work. Obviously, we hear about the volume of work, but the volume of work itself doesn't necessarily determine what the classification of a position may be. And I learned this myself. My first job I worked on at UNC in the Human Resources Department, and I answered the phone. And we literally had 6 phone lines, and that was when people did not apply online. They literally came in, dropped off their applications. They came in to ask about job openings, what was the status of their application, and it was just me at the front desk, and I'm answering all 6 phone lines, trying to greet everyone coming in, process the applications in the computer. And when they went to study my job, I thought, surely they're going to classify my position because I am so busy, I cannot do all this. And I learned quickly then about classification that it wasn't the volume of the work, it was the work that I was doing that was determining what that position was and what the salary grade was for that. And that was more of an issue that we needed a second person in that role, and we ultimately did get a second person, but volume of work itself is not a classification factor. The employee's length of service or how long they've been, either with the city or in that position also doesn't come into play with the classification factor. We do look at that when we make some recommendations on how to move employees within the pay plan, looking at their length of service, but the individual employee doesn't come into play with the actual position. Employee qualifications. So this means qualifications that the employee might have above and beyond what those minimum requirements are. We talked about like education, certifications, experience. When we worked in Chapel Hill, they have a transit system that takes buses all around campus. People can hop on and off the buses. And we would typically have students that had just completed their law degree, and while they were studying for the bar, they would come to work for the transit department and drive those transit buses around. And so when we were studying those transit positions, we had to make sure we understood that it was the actual work of the transit and not the individual employees, the fact they had the law degree. So it's just kind of a good example that we're truly looking at the position and what's required of the position and not what an employee might have that's not necessarily relevant to the position required. And then, of course, employee work performance. So obviously you have employees that they're doing a great job in their role, and there might be employees that are new and they're still learning their role, but the position still is what it is. And if you have an employee that's not necessarily performing all the functions of a position for work performance reasons, that's a separate issue you want to deal with performance management. So we do the internal equity, where we're comparing the positions and we're looking at them all based on the classification factors. And then we go outside and we look at the positions and compare them to the market. So we did, I call it a market study, a salary survey study, where we pull different organizations that are considered to be in your market, and we look at what their pay ranges are for the positions that you have here in the city. We try to find positions that are what we consider to be within a commutable distance, and that's usually what we determine to be within an hour. Most people might be willing to commute within an hour to another employer. It's also organizations that you might be losing employees to, you might be recruiting employees from, somewhat similar in the market. So some of them are going to be larger than Belmont, some of them are going to be smaller, but you might want to make sure that your pay plan is in line with these positions. So these are the organizations that we included in the salary survey. You can see, and I did work with Miles and Hannah on selecting some of these organizations. Sometimes we have a hard time getting salary data from organizations, but we were very lucky and were able to get the salary data that we needed. So we pulled together all the information as far as the positions that you have now, and we call them benchmark positions, as well as some positions that you might be looking at creating in the future, and seeing what other organizations in the salary survey have, and then looking at their salary ranges. And then we put together this market salary survey. So this is just an example. This is not Belmont's, but just want you to see what typically a market salary survey looks like. So we have the different organizations that are included in the survey down the left-hand side. And then we have the benchmark positions that we're looking for their salary ranges on the top. And then we take those hiring rates or minimum rates and maximum rates, and then we do an average of them, which is typically 50% of the market. And then we, look where Belmont is now and make some recommendations on the salary grade based on that. So this is kind of that external equity that we're looking at in addition to the internal equity. So this is just a one page, just to kind of give you an example. So we've done the internal equity analysis, the external equity, and that helps us determine the job value. And obviously, every position in an organization is valuable, and every position has value. So when I mention job value, I truly mean the salary grade that we're looking at in the pay plan. So this is just a sample pay plan, just so you can see what we're talking about. Belmont already had a pay plan in line, some organizations don't. But we have salary grades on the left-hand side, and then every salary grade has a salary range. And that's typically a minimum, a midpoint, and a maximum. Some organizations have what's called a hiring rate, where they might bring employees in a little bit below that minimum and then move them up. But most organizations are doing away with the hiring rate, just starting at the minimum. And I prefer that. I think it's better to bring them in where they need to be when they start. And so then each salary grade has classification titles that, based on the internal equity analysis and the market data, we're trying to group them together into this pay plan so that it's the equal pay for equal work and having some comparable positions in the pay plan. So when I talk about compensation structure, obviously your salary structure, your pay plan, is important. That internal equity, comparing positions to each other within the organization, the market data is important, but also your benefits are very important. And we usually recommend that you consider doing like a total benefit or total compensation statement for your employees every 2 to 3 years, because a lot of times employees don't realize the additional value and the additional pay that the city puts forward to have that position in the budget. So it's nice to have a statement that says, well, yes, your salary might be $40,000, but the town is also putting this much into the retirement system and paying this much towards your health insurance and dental insurance. So even though your actual pay is $40,000, the town might be paying $70,000 a year to have your position, to have you employed with the town. So the benefits are very important, and it's important to share with the employees so that they know that. And then pay movement, how you move employees through those ranges throughout the years. Every organization's different when it comes to that. I'm working with one organization that has steps, and every 2 to 3 years they move an employee up a step. Other organizations might have merit pay, performance pay, where you do performance evaluations, and then they get merit pay throughout the year, which helps move them throughout the range, so they're not just staying at one point within the range. So there's a lot of different things you can do as far as moving, but you want to make sure you continue to move the employees through the ranges. So at the end of the study, what we want to make sure the deliverables for the organization is the updated classification and pay plan, recommendations on job titles and salary grades, updated job descriptions, that market assessment salary survey, that's helpful to have for the records because you might use that throughout the year. We'll be looking at the exempt and non-exempt and making recommendations on that, which is helpful, especially in human resources out of that. And then recommendations on pay policies and practices, if that's something that you want us to look at. I did want to mention with the salary survey data, this is really one snapshot in time, because this salary data will be, for your organization, something that we gathered in the last few months. A lot of the organizations that we gather that data for are then going to increase their salary ranges July 1, because typically you move your ranges based on the amount of your cost of living. So if you're giving a 4 or 5% cost of living July 1, a lot of those ranges for those other organizations, they're going to be moving whatever their cost of living increases as well. So it is important to know that this is really currently now, so you still want to look at your cost of living in addition to any kind of changes you might have in the pay plan. So ultimately, the final goal is to make sure you have a classification structure and a pay plan, a compensation plan that's accurate, it's equitable with the other positions within the organization, it's competitive in the market, so that you can recruit, retain the employees that you have. Do you have any questions about the study in general? So once we have put together the updated classifications by grade or the salary structure, we then have to determine where we want to move them, how we want to put employees into these new pay grades, if there's new pay grades. So we call those implementation strategies or implementation options. So, we talked to them about taking the employees and how do we want to place them in there. We typically run 2 to 3 different options for an organization initially, just to kind of get the conversation going. So there's a variety of things that you can do. You can take employees and you can just bring them up to the minimum, and that is just the bare minimum. We never recommend that because then you have all your employees that are right at the minimum of the range, and that creates a lot of compression issues. So, but there are some organizations, and that's what they can afford to do at that time. So, but if you can afford to do more, we like to bring employees up to the minimum and then move them throughout that range to alleviate compression. And a lot of times it can be how long they've been in the organization. So when I talk about employee service to the organization, we might say we move them into the range 1% for every year of service that they have with the city, or 2% for every year of service that they have with the city. So the employees are moving throughout that range of whatever you put in there. We can also look at time and position. So you bring them to the minimum and maybe give them 1.5% for every year of service in that particular position. We could do something called blended, where we look at both time and position and time within the organization. We also can do something where if you have a certain dollar amount that you need us to stay within, we kind of back off and put together some options like that. So we put together several different options for Miles and Hannah to take a look at, and then they're going to make some recommendations in the budget for that. I did want to say that in general, the city has done a really good job. The pay plan is very well in line with the market in most areas. So where we saw some issues with the pay plan where we might need to come up were primarily in police and fire. And I will tell you that's what we're seeing in most of the organizations that we're working with right now. Because when I talk about the market sometimes fluctuates, it's a little bit harder in some positions, some departments than others. We're seeing that statewide. So that, and we're also seeing that if you have an electric department, we're seeing that with electric. And then wastewater treatment plants. It's very difficult to recruit very qualified, skilled wastewater treatment plant operators. A lot of times you can bring them in and train them, but it takes a while for them to get their certifications that they need to move up. So that was an area as well where we saw some increases in the pay plan. I wanted to just mention to you, I know you have some handouts right there, and I also wanted to share, in addition to the salary survey that we did for all the benchmark positions, we also did a salary survey for elected officials. That's something that we normally do as well. So it shows those same organizations that were included in the salary survey. It has their annual salary for mayor, if the mayor pro tem is separate from the mayor, and then a council member, so that you'll have that information. We have the proposed Belmont salary schedule, which we stayed with the same schedule that you have now because it is working and it is pretty competitive. The changes that we made, we did bump the minimum and the maximum up from a 50% spread to a 60% spread. That's pretty typical to see that, and it allows more room for growth for the employee within there so they don't max out too quickly. And then we added some additional salary ranges at the top end, and that'll allow for future growth if you create positions so you're not having to necessarily kind of cap out there. And then the additional document that you'll have is the classifications by grade. So that'll show those same salary grades with a minimum and maximum, and then what positions fall within those salary grades, salary ranges. And again, that's based on with that comparing positions internally to each other and then comparing those positions to the market. So making sure they're both in line with the market and in line with each other within the organization. A couple things we like to suggest. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure you find a way to continue to move your salary ranges, which I think you obviously have been doing that because you are competitive in the market with most of your positions. So just whatever you have been doing as far as continuing to increase those ranges when you do cost of living increases, finding ways to continue to move employees throughout those ranges. We do like to recommend that the manager have the ability to tweak if there's some areas where there might be some changes there, or if you have employees that may not be, either they have some disciplinary actions, or maybe they're not performing the duties to the point that they should be, to maybe hold off on those increases if there's one that was recommended until the employee's to the point where they need to be. So we usually just recommend that in general to any organization. So So we still have a little bit more, we are gonna be finishing up on the job descriptions, and we'll be getting those to Miles and Hannah over the next few weeks. We already had some discussion about the personal policy, but we're helping them finalize that as well, and getting a final report together. But we wanna make sure you have this information, and see if you have any questions about it at this point.
Questions?
And just as another note too, Mayor and Council, that, they did recommend 4 different options, and what we used to balance the budget was option number 3, and that brought all the employees up to the minimum, and, included a 2%, years of service, contribution to that. The total for, option 3 was, $345,275. That includes the general fund and the water sewer fund, and so the breakdown, I have somewhere as far as which fund those two are, and I think it's in Kevin's upcoming presentation, but I think it's 269,000.
269,645.
Thank you, 269 for the general fund, and the remainder being the water sewer.
Just out of curiosity for my benefit, how often do municipalities generally do this type of study?
It depends, but typically every 5 years, every 4 to 5 years, it's good to do. The League of Municipalities does put together a salary survey, and you're hoping that organizations will send your salary data to them. So they have that, and then they'll publish that every year. But a lot of times by the time they publish it, it's 6 to 7 months old. But that's a little bit separate from them coming in and looking at all the positions. So at least every 4 to 5 years, it might be a good idea to come in and do a study. You can kind of, throughout the years, check and see what other organizations are paying, the ranges for police officers or firefighters, or if there's a particular area you might have some concerns.
Can we look into making that like a policy? I don't know what we need to pass, but, every X amount of years, Belmont will do this, just for like budgeting purposes, because it was 8 years out since the last one we did it. So I think that might be helpful with the conversation to have for future budgeting. We know in 3 years, 5 years, we're gonna do this. So I don't know what we need to pass, but I think that might be beneficial.
Any other questions?
So the last time this was.
2017.
Charlie, any questions?
This was helpful.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, now you're looking for us to make a selection between options 1 and 4.
I believe we said they already paid. Do
Um,
we need to approve that?
Yeah, staff recommended, correct, staff recommended option number 3, and that's already included inside of your balanced budget that you have. If during the conversation goes along during the upcoming budget discussion, and if there needs to be any movement of a budget one way or another, I mean, this would be a factor that we would consider. But as soon as the presentation is made, if it goes like smoothly, we would keep option 3 in place as the balanced budget.
Just because I think it might be helpful on separate, because when I was going through this, I didn't really see it. If I missed it, let me know. Do we have what the current is for Belmont? So like, what does this compare? Because I'm actually kind of curious where we were off to make, just for information for us. So like, this is the proposed payment schedule by grade. I'd be curious to know where were we at prior to that?
We have it, it's in huge spreadsheet format, but we can provide that to you as well.
I mean, I don't know if y'all think it would be helpful as well. I don't know. I just think it'd be curious to see.
Yep, I can send it to you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so let me ask you this question. Are you looking for something from us just to support your selection of 3? It's for city council to hear the presentation and render a decision?
Correct, yes, if you, you hadn't seen, the other 2 options and how those numbers may fall, but the recommendation from us to balance the budget was option number 3. But like I say, if we move through the budget, scenario here just in a few minutes. And, you know, you all want to have something other than what's proposed, then we have to consider, you know, whether that's salaries to change, or whether we would change like capital projects, or whether we would change operations. If there's any kind of discussion that moves through that budget process, and I'd hate for you all to say, let's stick with option 3, and then we have a discussion coming up, and it may change, and we have to go back and staff and look at possibly option 2 or option number 1. So maybe just take this information as presented and let us continue with the budget discussion, and if we need to change anything to the process, we can do that.
All right, then, with that said, let's go ahead and move on to item 4, budget workshop.
And, just for like benchmarking purposes, like total payroll budget is what, like roughly $9.8 million?
I believe with this option, it's 10.2, I think is what it is, which. There's a total for option number 3, it looks like the column that's, summed out, $10.6 million for payroll using option 3.
Okay, that's with you, okay.
And that's without, that's option 3, bringing everyone to the minimum, and then adding $345,000 to that amount.
Okay, so
For that
45 is about that.
All right, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Here tonight to present the fiscal year 24-25 budget to you. You've had a chance for about a week now, I guess, to go over what was given to you a couple of Thursdays ago, maybe. So just, we do have a few new council members. Just quick points on public sector budgeting. The first one is that council, each year you have to approve a balanced budget by June 30th. So you could be in here up until midnight on June 30th.
11:59.
11:59.
Hey, Kevin, we might want to wait for the only new
Okay,
council member next year.
sure. We probably don't want to do that. It's probably not your first choice,
That's the plan, right?
but you do have that option.
It's been years where I've wondered.
I think we came close, right?
Coffee and pizza, whatever it takes to get us through. So Councilman Hill, we were.
This is new information for new council members, so.
Just, we have 3 new members that haven't really been through this process before. 2 of them are here, but they may see it later on YouTube. So each year we have to adopt a balanced budget by June 30th. And in budgeting, in local government, we use fund accounting. And in Belmont, we have 3 different funds. We have our general fund, that's our general government. Then we have our water and sewer fund, and then our stormwater fund. And those 3 pots of money keep to themselves. The funds do not intermingle, and we do not make transfers, so they're self-supporting. The general fund is supported mostly by taxes, and then the water and sewer fund by fees, and the same with stormwater, with the stormwater fee. So public sector budgeting involves consensus building on what services should be provided and to what level. And that's the big key, is determining what do we want to provide and what level of service. And the next one says it's not easy. And it's easy to get to a balanced budget, but trying to take all the different interests that everybody has and then knowing your resources and trying to make everyone happy the best you can and provide those services. It's a juggling act. So looking at our general fund this year and looking at our revenue, we had an 11% increase from the prior year. That's $22.8 million in general fund revenue is what we're predicting. And that increase is mostly because of last year being a reval year, we were conservative on the appeal rate. And remember, we had a 10% appeal rate. So that's where a lot of this is from. And your budget is balanced based on our current tax rate of 45.5 cents. The key changes from last year, I mentioned one, that ad valorem taxes have increased, and that's because of that conservative number on the appeal rate. Your interest on investments, in the past, we have not really budgeted those, but looking back, that's been sort of a trend. So we wanted to make sure and capture all the revenue that you all are seeing, so that you have as much revenue to work with when you're making your decisions. Sales tax are predicting to go up almost $500,000. And police grants and reimbursements and the ABC distributions make up about another $130,000 there. So those were the biggest changes in the line items from the previous year. So I think it was page 3 of your budget, you had a breakdown of the general fund, pages 3 and 4. So what these next few slides do is just tell that information a different way. So you can see your general fund department budget snapshot, and this is broke down into personnel, operations, and capital. You can see what it takes for each department. Each department's different. Where you see our public safety, that's mostly people that do that. Where you can see in some of the other departments, like streets, for instance, their operations cost more than their personnel. So it's just different types of jobs. And we see just a little bit of green up there for capital. Don't think that's all the capital that we're investing in this year. This is just the departmental level capital, the stuff that's between $5,000 and $50,000. If it goes over 50, we include that in our CIP plan. So looking back at last year compared to what we're projecting this year, you can see there that each department has a slight increase. That's typical. Planning went backwards. The reason why is because last year we budgeted for the current year that we're in now, budgeting for the comprehensive land use plan. So when we made the budget amendment last time, you're seeing all those dollars go into this year, so their budget decreased. And then if you want to look at the percent of the general fund, what makes it up by each department, there you go. You've got about 45% of it is public safety. So whenever you're looking at your whole budget, a lot of it is there in the streets. Recreation only makes up 5% of the total budget. Now that doesn't include the debt service payment on the rec center, for instance. So a little bit of that debt there in gray would belong to that recreation. But this is our personnel operations.
And Kevin, because I know we talked about this in the past, but just benchmarking, that's generally like where most municipalities are when it comes to cost breakout, right?
Public safety almost always can take up 50%. It can be more in smaller places, because things they need are the same wherever they are. They just need maybe more people here.
Percentage breakdown?
Yeah, correct. So like for our size town, like that's like meshes with what our neighbors do, or folks that are, or towns that are our size, I guess.
And of course, it depends on if you provide the service or not. Some people contract those services out, they can skew it a little. So in the budget, there were 17 positions requested by all the department heads. There are 7 that were recommended, 4 of them in the police department, 2 in the fire department, and 1 in planning and zoning.
Right, so for the police department, the 4 officers will create a south zone. That's, the peninsula area, so you'll get 4 new officers in that south zone. For the fire department, last year, the fire department was granted 1 position. They have 3 shifts, so they got 1 firefighter last year that kind of offset their other 2 shifts, and so we're recommending that we hire those other 2 firefighters, which will make their shifts equal this year. And then planning and zoning is for planning technician. Given that there's a number of permits, a number of new homes that are, of course, being constructed, you've got neighborhoods that are out there that are not built out, and all the renovation permits that are coming in, the planning department needs a new person to help out with that process. So just want to give you a little bit of highlights on what those positions were.
Can Can I ask a question? This is one of those questions I was talking about, Miles. So for the planning and zoning addition, so if you think about that and kind of in the description you just said, you know, it's with the influx of additional houses that were coming in, right? So there's going to become a time where those houses are done, they're completed. And I would imagine we're not going to just terminate that position after it happens. So what I'm trying to get at from a cost perspective, is that position needed in perpetuity after all the houses have been completed? And if not, is it something that we can contract out during the duration while the houses are being built? Because again, we got to be very careful and cautious when we're getting to that, you guys are going to get tired of me saying it, but that level, kind of leveling the plane out when development starts slowing down. So that's just my concern and thought process that we might want to kind of think about in regards to that.
Yeah, for like the number of years that we'd have to contract that out, and the cost for consultants versus the cost for in-house staff, of course, we always weigh that out. We also kind of talked about it internally as well, as far as it may shift at some point from new construction, but we still have a number of homes that are out there that get renovated, that they build decks, they do certain things, they renovate their house. So there's always that side of it coming in as well. I don't know what the exact breakdown, so Tiffany could come up. I've asked department heads also. They're all prepared. If you have any questions for any departments, that they can come up to the microphone and kind of explain that out. But as far as the breakdown is concerned between like the number of renovation permits versus like the number of new permits, I don't really know where that fine line is to at some point, you know, carry that out for the future. But that, I mean, of course, it would be considered if we feel like we don't need a position in, you know, 10 years from now, we're not going to continue to have a position that we really don't need. But go ahead.
Sure. So in terms of what would be renovations versus individual new single-family home permits, that is really hard to project out. But Miles is absolutely correct that as the town grows, as our housing stock increases, even when it starts to plateau out, people by nature tend to do renovations on their home. And even with an interior renovation, a lot of times we'll still need to do a zoning verification for Gaston County. So the role of what exactly gets permitted will likely change over time as we end up running out of new land for new development. But the other side of that I wanted to share with you all is that the role of that planning technician can grow and morph with the growth of our department as well. And so one of the things that the new position would allow us to do is not only have more people to increase customer service for folks that are walking in to get zoning permits and to help process the lots that have already been approved, but that role will also grow in helping to increase our customer service, but also community engagement. So that role will also include some administrative assistance for the planners to help with invoicing and collections of all of our permitting and fees. We'll take calls that help to answer questions like with a comprehensive land use plan about how do I get involved in the process? How do I make sure that my community ends up being what I want my community to be? What about transportation? It is that person that they can go to while someone else might be processing permits. The role may transition over time, but it's still the entry-level position for the department. So even as single-family residential permits may start to plateau out or even decline over time, there's still a necessary need for an additional person in my department to offer the level of customer support and education to make sure that our residents are involved and can continue to be involved in our future land use planning for the town.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
When was the last time a new position was added?
It's been 3 years. And the reason that I'm coming before you now is one of the things that we had tried to do before coming to you for a new position was really increase our efficiency with technology. We feel like we've done that, and we're continuing to look at solutions to make that process more efficient as well. Turnaround times become a big factor both for individual permits but as well as plan reviews, especially when we look to attract economic development projects. Big companies like that, they really are mindful of what goes into the plan review process. So the more we can utilize technology but also utilize a powerhouse team of staff to be able to make that smooth, it will help us to attract and retain companies to come in and invest here in our town. So yes, the role might ebb and flow over time, but that really will make us more attractive and competitive in that market.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, assumptions as we put this budget together, just reminders for you all, is the tax rate at 45.5 cents. Included in this budget, for our employees has been included a 2% cost of living and a 3% merit that's been included. And these are in line with the statistics from the Bureau of Labor for state and local government employees. I believe it was 4.8% was the average last year. Salary study implementation has been included. The city manager mentioned that earlier. The general fund total included is $269,000 in water and sewer. I'm almost $74,000. So looking at our capital improvement plan, once the budget's put together, there's $1.7 million to dedicate towards capital projects. These are the ones that staff's recommended. As you saw in your handout, there's other projects that are there. And this is a living document. We can move these things around as you direct us. So this is our recommendation as we start. So for public safety, there's two things. It's updating some cabling and a server rack at the fire department, and then updating all the cameras at the police department. That one's critical due to their requirements and the CALEA certification. So that was for sure needs to happen. The facilities and community projects. I think this one used to be called this community enhancement section, if you remember from the old CIP. So we've added facilities to this. So new parks, new cameras at our city parks. For the skate park, Kevin Lofton, Gant Park, and Stowe Park. This is important because, as you know, people have cameras all the time, and whenever you need them, they weren't working for some reason. You hear that so much, so we don't want to have that problem anymore. We've had a couple instances recently of some vandalism. If we would have had cameras, it would have helped the police, I'm sure, tremendously. So we feel that it's important. Repairs to City Hall, we really haven't no idea exactly the extent to which these repairs are going to be needed, but we have budgeted $40-some thousand, I believe, is in there to put towards City Hall, because that had been brought up that we needed to do some maintenance. And then there's money included to pay the architect fees for the City Hall remodel project. For Parks and Recreation, replacing the ball field lights at those fields, Frey, Rodman, Davis, and Reed. That's considered to be a debt service project. It's planned in your CIP as a 5-year loan, so it's almost $500,000 a year on the debt service payment, which is costly, but we may be able to extend that out further. We want to be conservative. I'm not sure if you can get much longer than a 5-year loan, but first trying, our advisors had it 15 plugged in there. We changed it to 5. If we are able to get 15-year loan, that frees up a lot of money. And replacing the bleachers at those fields as well, including Central. For the streets department, the street paving, the $250,000, and then the sidewalk, $100,000. That's something that we recommend just continually including that in your CIP. That number can be adjusted every year, just depending on different factors. But it's your PAL bill. You do get PAL bill every year, and that can offset that expenditure right there. But we wanted to include that. That is above and beyond the other paving money that was in the streets department budget, because there's some other placeholders for their utility cut repairs and then just basic other repairs. There's a leaf vac truck and a switch and go truck that's been requested. That's also debt. So we have the debt service payment included. And then the Poplar Street rehab. We've got that in there at the $150,000 mark, I believe.
And the contours of that project, just to be clear, for Poplar Street?
I would turn it over to the Public Works Director if you want to tell what all is included, I believe.
So that estimate of $150,000 looked at milling the existing asphalt, replacing the sidewalk on a large section of Poplar Street, and then also coming back with new asphalt, and then doing any minor repairs to the subgrade.
Thank you.
And real quick, did we not just get a new leaf vacuum truck in the last year's budget?
I believe it was a claw truck.
It was a claw truck.
Yes,
So how many leaf trucks do we have right now? Is it one,
two, I believe.
two? So we're gonna keep using both of those?
That would be the plan. One of them is aging, so this would replace that one that's, coming up with more and more maintenance issues and concerns as it ages.
Would we run all three of them, I guess, or?
If we needed to, yes.
Okay, so it's not like we can just park with the aging one, like surplus it and sell it off or whatever?
That is a possibility, yes. We would like to see at least how it goes 1 year, see if we can shorten that window, for how long it takes us to collect the leaves, running all three if possible.
Okay, and what is a switch and go truck?
That is, that's a truck with a specialized bed on it that allows us to, purchase different types of equipment, to where we could put a dumpster on the back of it and then take that dumpster out to a resident that rents the dumpster from the city as a service that we offer instead of taking the dump truck out there. There's also several other attachments that you can utilize for that truck. So it's essentially buying multiple pieces of equipment in one.
Does it come with the attachments?
It does not come with the attachments, no.
So when are we planning to buy the attachments?
I believe the first attachment we would get would be a dumpster. And then as the needs arise, we would look at budgeting those other attachments.
Okay, because I didn't see the attachments in there.
What are some examples of other attachments?
So you can, a flatbed would be one, an actual dump truck is another, a removable dumpster is an option. And then I believe you could put like a leaf back system on the truck as well. There's multiple things that are available.
But just to confirm, do we need to add the attachment on here?
I believe that price includes
Oh,
the initial attachment.
okay.
Can I ask you about the leaf truck that needs to be replaced? How old is that truck?
I do not know offhand.
Okay. Seems like we did just purchase some leaf trucks. I remember because they've got the automated control, right?
Yes.
Well, we would have purchased them not too long ago, because we just went back to doing it in-house within the last, 3 years?
I think it was 2 years ago we purchased a leaf truck, is what I'm recalling. Because that was pretty top of mind, because I believe that's right when we switched with the waste management. Is that right, Kevin, was it about 2 years ago?
2 years ago, I believe it was debt service.
Okay.
And it's just a one?
It was combined with another piece of equipment for the financing, but there was a leaf truck that was purchased.
Just for my own knowledge, I'm just curious, when you say this truck, which doesn't seem to be that old, is experiencing a lot of mechanical issues, these are very low mileage vehicles, so I'm assuming mechanical engine issues have to do something with the vacuum system?
Correct. Yes.
I think it was last year, both of them went out at one
Both
time.
of them were down for a period of about a month this past fall.
I mean, and again, just for my knowledge, it's a relatively new piece of equipment. Does it make sense to maintain the equipment? Because what you're doing on there is basically putting a blower vacuum motor replacement, I'm guessing, to suck up the leaves. So that's
Well, I think for me, where I'm trying to drive at, Richard, I think it might be a bigger question, because I wasn't part of the analysis, or that was right after, before I became council, but are we starting to get into the territory where it's becoming more expensive for us to do this in-house than it was to have this at a third-party contractor? Because that's one of the reasons why, because if I remember correctly, the contract, this happened before me, the contract was done in error, right? It was super cheap for what Waste Management Pro was doing it for
That was
us.
for the brush pickup maybe, or I believe, because I think they were charging us for leaf collection, a really good rate,
Yeah,
but then the brush collection just got thrown in there.
okay.
So they weren't really charging us for that. If I'm thinking correctly, that's right, yeah.
Because now we're averaging, right, so, and when did we take that in-house?
This would be our third year doing this.
It has to be like only 3 years or 2. You've done that relatively recently.
it's 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I believe this was our second season.
Okay. Because where I'm getting at is over the course of 3 years, we've now purchased 2 leaf vacuuming trucks. One's potentially failing, aging or whatnot. I don't know when we got that one, how old that is. I'm trying to see where the cost benefit is now. Because if we're just gonna keep buying equipment year after year, I can probably assure us that we're not saving money when it comes to leaf collection.
Their contract went up quite a bit. I think it had something to do with their tipping fees as well. Had gone up considerably. But I mean, part of the argument also was they just weren't doing a good job. They were running horrible routes. Places were not being vacuumed for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And, you know, the argument was, and I mean, I support the argument, when it was done in-house, Belmont looked a whole lot better and the streets were cleaner.
Okay. Because that was
I mean, it was sort of, if I'm remembering correctly, I mean, it was gonna be expensive either way, but Richard's right. You know, it was an efficiency argument that, and I can vouch for that even on my street. You know, before we brought it in-house, you know, if you missed the truck, God knows when the leaves might be picked up. But now it's like, I put them out there and, you know, assuming they're running, you know, like I know within like a week they're gonna be picked up. But I know that I saw leaves on my own street sit there under the old system for a very long time.
Are we going to be, last question, are we going to be doing routes, or is it still going to be call and schedule?
Right now, it's still being called, calling media schedule.
For leaves,
I thought leaves were on a route. I thought it was a yard waste.
Yes, that's correct. So leads would be the, yes.
Oh, okay.
That's correct.
The last one was purchased in 2021.
2021 was the last one? Okay.
2021 is when you approved the purchase for it.
Yeah. Okay.
all right, thank you.
See, earlier, at the very beginning, we had a slide that said what service you want to provide and at what level.
Mm-hmm.
And this is that same scenario. And you're right, Mayor, the biggest thing was the service was not good. And we knew we could do better. Sometimes things may cost more if you do them in-house, but you can control them better and provide that service. And people seem to be very happy with the way it is now. Did we finish this one? Yeah. So for administration and technology, this is our last section for the CIP. It's a security badge project for City Works. This has been talked about since the building was opened. We just always had things that came up. So this is important for security, and also so I can't remember the codes anymore. We have to change the codes all
Every
the
time
time.
you remember it, they change.
My brain's full of numbers. I can't remember another 4-digit number. Connect City Works and City Rec via a fiber network bridge. This will save us money in the long run. We'll only have to have like one service provider for a couple things, and we can connect that way. Update the main server, update 4 switches, and then update the City Works conference room video. This would be a really great thing for us in this building because we have to have a lot of these calls now, video calls, and it's an adventure every time, isn't it?
What if I may?
Yes, sir.
The 2 update main server and update 4 switches, what does that all entail?
Well, the server has to be done every usually so many years. I don't know if Yvette's in the room. Do you want to come up and just briefly talk about the server and the switches?
Yes.
Like they're out of warranty
Yeah,
or
they're
something?
end of lease.
End of lease.
So our, good evening, council. The main server is actually end of lease for next year. So I've added that main server. It's a must. We don't have one main server, so it needs to be updated. It's about 5 years old, the one that we currently have now. And the switches as well. Switches end of lease this fiscal year. I've extended the lease just because I came in during the time that it was end of lease. Didn't have really time to do, to find new switches, so I added it to the CIP.
Switches to what?
It's not the switches.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm glad I asked.
No, it's not that type of switch.
I see.
They run our network infrastructure. Yeah.
Right, very good.
Yeah.
Does just offhand, does any of this, would that improve the audio in this room? No?
No, absolutely not.
Um,
No, but we do have, no.
Yeah.
We are, so that you know, the network wasn't, it's not also, we have a network project going on right now for the City Works building. So our data jacks are being updated currently as we speak. We're having meetings and getting that situated. So the switches are gonna go ahead and just improve the overall network configuration for the building. I know right now we have, second floor right now is currently on Wi-Fi, because there's no terminated jacks into our switches. Our patch panels up on our internet, our network floor closet. So we're doing all that fix, updating that currently now, and then the switches are gonna come in and improve our overall network for our building.
All right, well, I mean, I just, notwithstanding the sort of ill-conceived dais project, put the dais to one side, or forget the dais, but I think everyone still agrees it would be nice, I still get complaints about audio at council meetings and not being able to hear. I mean, everyone, for some reason, they can all hear me, but, I do hear issues about audio in general for the
Yeah.
meetings.
Well, and so that you are aware too, so right now we have a wireless setting, just because we don't have a network laid out here on our first floor. Our Ethernet jacks are not connected to the third floor again, so by doing so, bringing in the new switches, new server, it's gonna help everybody. Actually, the whole staff is gonna be able to wanna come to work now, because they're gonna have, capabilities of doing their work orders with, fast internet speeds right now. I get a lot of complaints that it's like, it takes them 15, 20 minutes just to do one work order, so.
Well, I think our staff does want to come to work every single day.
They wanna come because their network's good.
But going back to the DIAS construction project, so we did have like one line item for an IT improvement in this area for audio visual. But that was related to how we would get it to the DIAS area. And so given that DIAS construction project no longer exists, we still have funds in this fiscal year for a CIP project to improve the audio visual in this room. So what I've asked Yvette to do, probably a month ago now, to work with our vendor, they gave us that quote for the DIAS construction, to revise the quote, knowing that we'll be in this configuration to actually improve the audio visual. So we're still kind of working on, we had to take that piece of it out, send it over here and say, hey, it's not gonna work, because it's not the same construction project, therefore it's not the same quote. So we're still trying to get through that piece of it.
Okay, good, well, that's good, because I think everyone sort of would agree that,
Is that right?
Yeah, that's
the dais was one thing, but the audio is something that's, needs to be done with or without the dais, or dais.
But it'll be all hardwired, so yes, so it's gonna be improved.
Yeah, to do all of that, though, you have to do the data jacks and the ports, the
Yes.
electricity and everything else to get to that point, so.
Yeah. There's a couple steps, phases in it, so, the step one is to get the network infrastructure stabilized. Number two, then adding audio and video to it, so.
Very good, thank you.
Any questions on the general fund?
Just for, like metrics and stuff like that, because again, I think it's kind of key, because if we just set these like arbitrary targets and don't like track where we are with our like colleagues in other municipalities, I've calculated, if it's wrong, let me know, but it's like roughly 8.5% is budgeted towards CIP. Is that correct for the general fund? It's like what, $20 million? So does that track with what other municipalities do or allocate? Because I feel like we always just say, all right, here's our projects, here's our numbers. I really am curious if there's like a benchmarking that we can do that says this is how much a municipality should be spending a year for capital improvement.
I don't believe that there's really a standard. It's so different from municipality to municipality. And it depends on the elected body. It depends on just the projects
So do you remember what Mount Holly's was, for example?
No, I don't. I don't know if I've ever seen any kind of data. I mean, I know that School of Government pulls a lot of data on a lot of these budgetary items like this. We can see if they have anything, but, like Kevin said, it really goes down to, how big is your CIP? And our CIP is, for the general fund, is pretty large.
It's like 24 million.
24 million, that's not including really all the project costs.
Yeah, correct. So, yeah, it's growing every single year. It's just getting bigger and bigger. So we're trying to accomplish a task. We're looking at funding, the operations and the salaries. And then if there's anything, the $1.7 billion that is, I don't want to say left over, but it's outside of those two other items, try to plug that into it. So that's kind of how we structured when we went through the budget process. But we can try to find if there's anything.
I would just be curious, because I always think it is like the past 2 years, and again, I'm sorry guys, I just have a lot of questions when it comes to this, but like the past 2 years, it's just been very arbitrary. It's like, this is our plug to the budget, like you just said. So like, expenses are here, revenue's here, all right, what's our CIP? And I think I mentioned this last year, is like, I just don't feel like that's an effective way to be managing a municipality, because we need to know, year over year, what our planned expenses are on capital improvement plans, because we're always gonna have needs. There's always gonna be a street that needs to be paved, there's always gonna be a water line, but if we can set the standard and kind of track to that and say, this is what we're doing every year, I would feel more comfortable. And I don't know about you guys, if it's making sense, what I'm trying to explain is just, I don't think it should just be, okay, well, we don't have that much money for capital improvements this year. I don't think that's.
So you wanted to set a financial standard for earmarked funds each year, like, we're gonna spend $2 million on CIP as a standard, or $3 million?
Something like that to that effect, yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that.
But we always have projects, if we're always gonna have like 24 million plus, and it really depends on like the performance of that year, for how many we're gonna knock out and everything like that. So, again, if I'm thinking of the level of service, we should be providing the level of service of being able to knock these projects out fairly quickly.
And the strategy behind it would be to, it kind of goes back to the appetite of the elected officials. If you see that there's a big CIP and you want to accomplish that CIP in X number of years, then we have to look at how do we do that? Do we do that through the tax increase to pay for the projects over a period of time?
Well, that's the thing.
Right.
Do you look at certain things you can loan together, which we already do that. We try to put together the things that kind of can package together that we can take a loan out for, so we can pay for other things that are harder to get loans for. So we're already kind of like trying to manage that process, out for a period of time, but to not recommend the tax increase, that's really up to you all to tell us, hey, if you want to accomplish more CIP projects, then we can do that. We just need to know, like, on our side, would you be willing to do something different than what we're doing right now? And that's kind of like the direction we would need to bring something back to you to say, hey, here are all the projects. Here's how we can package them together. Here's the loans. And to do the rest of them, it could be 1 cent, 2 cent, 10 cent. I don't know, just in between. Or, vice versa. If you thought that that's not an appropriate method to accomplish a goal, it's the other way too. Well, you want to cut the tax rate, and we have to ourselves go back and say, what are the things that we can cut?
Yeah.
If you want to cut CIP, then what's not important anymore on this list of $24 million worth of projects.
Which is what we did last year.
Yeah. So really, it's like trying to come up with, elected officials to come up with like your strategy behind it, and then feed that down to us, and then we bring back, various scenarios to accomplish the task.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Again, it's just like, this is one thing I brought up for the past 2 years, I struggle with, is like, it's just this air number that we come up with, and I'm just like, there's gotta be some type of rationale or logic we can apply to this. Because we don't know. Because at the end of the day, we need to get stuff done on the CIP list, but anyways. All right.
Just one more question, before we move on to water and sewer. My question relates to the positions. 17 were recommended by the recommended by the department. The manager is recommending 7. By my count, police recommended 7. We were recommending 4. fire was 8 versus 2, and then there was one that was recommended by community development that was not recommended by the manager. And so I'd just be interested in the rationale for the manager's recommendations vis-a-vis what was proposed. You know, just sort of so that we're comfortable with, you know, the positions that we're creating and why you feel additional positions are not needed at this time.
Right, so, just starting with the first department, the planning department, of course, we talked through that one, that was the planning tech, requested one, recommended one. For the police department, it was 4 officers in the south zone, and so talked to Corky, that would make, you know, good sense to create like that south zone area. The other 2 officers there in the police department were 2 to assist zone 1. And the way I understand it, zone 1 was for the area around the Caramont Hospital, kind of like the north side of the city over there. And so we were thinking that given that the hospital's not open yet, we would recommend like starting off the year with an officer to cover that area. We talked about, Corky and I talked, Chief Falls and I talked about where does that officer actually sit with, you know, inside Caramont. At some point, we imagine that Caramont may pay for an officer to be there at some point in time. But the way I understand from the chief is that that officer would just be strictly related to like inside the hospital. Anything else outside the hospital, the generalized area, that officer would not go to a call. And so I didn't recommend moving forward with those 2 officers there. There was also a DUI enforcement officer, requested 1 DUI enforcement officer. There's a grant process we're currently in right now that we feel like we have pretty good potential to receive the approval for 1 DUI officer that would be paid outside of the city funds, city budget. So I recommended to not move forward with that one because that would be kind of awkward to accept a DUI officer and then we get a grant for an officer that we just approved.
And that's, we have one already that we did the same.
That's how it's treated for Sam right now, right? That, you know.
And I think we're at the point where we're paying all of that.
We're almost to the point, I think they gave us an extension on that 1 officer for 1 more year. Right, so, at some point you will be paying 100% for a DUI officer, but the same situation would occur for this 1 DUI officer that the police department had requested, so I said, let's not move forward with that, try to balance the entire budget. I didn't want to move forward with that one either. For the fire department, the fire chief had recommended 8 officers in anticipation of a new station potentially. And he had 2 options that he presented to me. One option was 8 officers in year 1. Another option too was like 16 officers and 8 officers in year 1, 8 officers in year 2, or just hire them all in 1 year. Given that we don't have any direction yet on the fire station location analysis study, I talked to Chief about their existing shifts and how they were off balanced with the 1 position that was hired last year and then the 2 that didn't equal it out. So I recommended to Chief that what did he feel about that kind of option, and Chief agreed that that was a good method to move forward with that. The community development department had an office manager requested at this point, and I recommended that we did not hire the office manager at this point, given that as we move through the process of economic development consultant that's prepared for next fiscal year, that this is a consultant position that we feel like we want to manage a consultant like with the staff we currently have versus like hiring somebody else to take on that role at this time. So I wanted to see how it would go with the consultant before I actually committed to a position.
Thank you.
Yes.
Sense.
One question, I'm sorry. On the officer request for the hospital, because I'm curious about this, because if we go to the Gaston Memorial or Caramont, is it a county officer that's at the hospital there. Because where I'm going with this, just to try to articulate myself, is, that hospital, yes, is in Belmont, but it's also gonna be serviced in Charlotte, Mount Holly, all these other places. So if I remember correctly, when I went to the Gastonia Hospital last time, I believe it was a county officer, not a city officer. That was like their person.
Right. Because the building is actually owned by the county,
Okay.
and a county police officer works there off duty. In our situation, with it being in Belmont,
Mhm.
we're gonna have a Belmont police officer inside of there. And it's something I think maybe for next year we can bring up, but I'll just briefly go over. So there's a couple of different options. And since the possibility of this taking place for Abbey to have an officer in the emergency room full-time, 24/7, 365, probably won't be until January of 2025. Okay, so, with that, those officers who work at the hospital in Gastonia get paid off duty by the hospital. They get paid at a rate so much an hour. And so by talking to the hospital staff and after discussing it with Miles, we agreed to just bring it up at a later point of time, whether we're planning on working it off duty for at least the 6 months until the new budget prep for 25, 26. And there is the option of, like, our SROs are funded through, we pay, or, the budget pays their salaries, and then the school system reimburses us the money for their salaries based on the number of hours they work. And I have had that discussion with the hospital, and they've agreed that's something they would entertain if possible, but I think it's something more for next budget season than this one, and that's how it works. But, so they pay a rate per hour for, basically however long you're at the hospital, and for this it'd be 24/7, 365, even on holidays.
Gotcha.
So there's a couple of different options there. All right.
All right, going over to our next fund, we talked about earlier, with number 2 and 3. So our water and sewer, taking a look at this little snapshot of it, you'll see that the revenues projected to be 9.3 million. Our expenses are a little more than that, at 10.2 million. So we've left that deficit there for this discussion and some future discussions. Notice that also, even including that, there's no capital spending planned from our net position other than the $10 million in state funding. So there's still, that difference in revenues and expenses, and that's with no capital on our part.
And that is with a $508,000 transfer from the general fund. Did I see that?
That is, what that is, remember we took out a loan. Remember I said that the departments are self-supporting and we don't take from others? Well, we did one time. We took we borrowed money, but we did a good thing. We set up a reimbursement resolution for it. So the general fund took a loan from the water and sewer fund. And so we had an agreement to pay it back over a period of time, $180,000 a year, over how many, 5 years? And so because our general fund is now doing so much better than the water and sewer fund is, we've decided to just go ahead and lump sum all the remaining debt from that loan and pay back to the water and sewer fund. So that what you're seeing in there is a wash on those two lines, where you see the revenue and the expenses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we don't do that anymore, by the way.
But it's allowed.
It's allowed, but
It's questionable by some.
But in a way, you're being your own banker, so you're not having to pay interest at the bank. But we did pay the other fund interest back.
So even with that,
even with that,
we're like,
yeah. So we've got some options.
Yeah.
So looking at the fund by department, same as we did in general fund, you can see the personnel and the operations and the capital. It's about 50-50 across all three departments. The change over prior year, very similar on the percentage of increases. All three departments have seen an increase. We're seeing that through just costs of chemicals, supplies, and then also some things that we talked about it in your your budget book, but the sludge removal. There's a lot of that that's need to be done, and it's expensive. So, telling that story again, you can see the prior year, what made up our total revenue, and you see last year we used $1.2 million in net position to balance the budget, and you can see where we are this year. So our revenue did increase. Our revenues increased from the prior year, even without that 1.2 million. So we're doing better, but there's still a gap. You can see where our expenses are because they continue to increase. So I don't have a laser pointer, but you can see the gap there that we need to fill. So here's your options. Looks like reduce, reuse, and recycle. That's not it. So the first one is just reduce. I wish we could just do those things and be okay. Reduce expenses by $922,000. That's hard to do that, very hard to do. The other option is to transfer from net position, but at this point, we don't have enough in net position to meet that full gap. And then the third one is adjust. So adjust our rate structure and or fees. Right now, a rate study is being done, and they, Withers Ravenel will be here May the 6th is our next meeting, so May 6th, they'll be here to discuss our current rates and their recommendations. There's many things you can do. You don't just have to increase a fee. You can also change the structure. So just by changing the amount of gallons that come as a minimum bill can do different things. So there's things that they'll discuss that we can do. Our rates haven't been adjusted in, 2016. It's been a while. I think the consultant will probably tell you that it's better to consistently raise just a little bit at a time. I think that's something that's always good to do. So you'll get those. Do you have a question, Councilman?
No, I was just gonna, Miles, that might be another one we might want to set like a standard policy for, that we're gonna review the rate study every so often so that we can get this done. Because that's pretty crazy, 2016. I mean,
it sneaks up on you, right? And then you have to do a reaction larger. It's just better to do things incrementally.
mm-hmm.
To do a rate study, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, to do a rate study. Yeah, because
last time the rate study was done.
Yeah, it was 2016, because to Kevin's point, I mean, in this study, which we know is gonna come back, it's gonna say the hike, it's gonna be quite a substantial hike. So people are gonna, well, relatively speaking, right? But people are gonna see that and notice it, whenever they open that bill and it's like 40-something bucks a month, and then all of a sudden now it's what, like $60 or something like that, I don't know how much it'll go up.
You'll see a lot of people that will adopt a CIP and a plan, and with that, they agree upon a certain increase every year, every other year. It's just sort of a plan thing.
Right, and I think the system development fee doesn't have to be reviewed every 5 years.
Yeah.
So we just reviewed that this year, and we're also doing this year, so I can imagine like every 5 years, you probably do both of them, and get on that same schedule. And just like Kevin said, for the structured rate study, typically they'll give you like a 5-year period to like increase. Here's what you need to do year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and then on year 5 you're studying again for the next 5 years for like how your rates are structured.
I know we're kind of crunched for time. The only other thing I have to say on here, I mean, obviously, I think the obvious answer is 1 and 3, right? Reduce and adjust. I've brought it up multiple times. I mean, have we done anything in regards to RFPs, looking for new vendors and sourcing new supplies for our chemicals? Because they are coming down, right? So these inflationary one-time costs that we've been hitting, well, they're not really one-time costs. I mean, are we competitive in the marketplace for what we're purchasing, right, from our vendors? I mean, that's how you start reducing number 1. And I really do think we should be doing that because those indices are coming down and we're probably paying a higher rate. And I'm telling you, supplier A is not going to come to us and say, hey, Belmont, you want to pay less? We're going to need to shop them out. So I brought that up for the past 3 years. I don't know if it's ever been done, but I think for 2 years now, for 3 years now.
I know salesmen walk into these offices all the time, so I'm sure they've heard options about it. And we can discuss it.
If it pleases the rest of the council, I'd like to see a report on that. because, I mean, this is something, if we can lower expenses, then it'll offset how much we're gonna have to raise the rate to impact the taxpayer. So I think that's a pretty reasonable request to understand, are we shopping this out? If we've been using the same supplier for years, I mean, we're going away the days of relationship. We need to be focusing on what's the biggest cost benefit to the taxpayers, so.
Well, let me interject something just historically. We did the rate study in 2016. It did, as Miles said, we forecasted out where the rates would be. And I think in Ron's last year on council, we looked at that and decided not to increase rates because our cash position was so strong at that time, or we were told it was very strong. And so we just let them plateau, and that's where they've been ever since. So I think it is. I think since then we found out their cash position may not be as strong as we thought it was, so it is probably time to revisit it.
Oh, I'm not disagreeing, I'm just saying if we can do a combination of the one and three, I mean, you ease the blow to the taxpayer. So, hold on, I do wanna, I mean, is that okay, is that to understand before pricing this stuff out? Because, I mean, I'm being pretty serious about that, that's gonna be a huge cost saving, I believe, if the potential's there.
Yeah, it would have to occur like, during the fiscal year. I don't
Yeah,
know about
that's-
like trying to shop things for like next year. But
No, I'm
next
saying,
month.
I mean, I don't know, this is your first, I get a little into the budget here, but, you know, I've said this for the past 2 years, and we've never had a resolution on this, so I'm just saying, if we could get like an update, and this isn't 2 months, this is just in general, to say, what have we done to reduce the cost? So as costs have gone up, okay, well, we never talk about the other side and say, well, this is the benefit, you know, this is what we've tried to do. Because I think particularly with the enterprise fund, this is something we do need to do, or we're just gonna keep raising it, which might be the answer, but it's not always the answer. We can reduce costs.
Our supplies, a lot of them are things that are sole source. So Mueller, for instance, that's who we get our meters from. There's not a competition there. You'd have to change the system to change the meter. Chemicals and things of that nature, there's several different places that they go to. I would think they're probably industry standard prices. And you also get 3 quotes. I know that I see 3 quotes every time they're buying pieces of equipment or even getting a service done. If it's not something normal, there's always 3 quotes that they get.
So with, Kevin is correct with like the meters and our credit for those meters. We would have to change out the entire meter system for the city to do something different there, which would be a large expense. As far as chemicals go, we do buy the chemicals in bulk. And there are only a limited number of suppliers for those chemicals, but we can definitely pull a report together and shop that around.
I mean, I think it'd be prudent if you just think about it. It's like chlorine, which we use, right? It's gone up like what, 25, 30-something%. So now it's coming down.
It's gone up more than that.
So, well, okay, but it's coming down now. So we need to start looking at this and staying ahead of the curve with the market as these prices start falling. So that's all I'm saying, because again, I don't want to put the full burden if we don't have to on the citizens. We may have to this year, right, when the study comes in, because we won't have this data, but again, let's think out of the box, that's all I'm saying.
It definitely can't hurt,
I mean, I'm dubious, but I'm like, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. There will be a lot of, but,
We'll see.
there's no harm
In trying.
And once we get contracts too for like an extended period of time, we bid those things out again. If you have like a mowing contract, for example, to make sure that, the cost is still like where it needs to be, fair and monthly. Once contracts are in place for 3, 4 years, typically have to do that process again, so like bid them out. We don't have to do that one. So we already do that, but we can add that to the list of, and provide reports to you.
Okay, yeah, I think that would be helpful.
And some of those costs, as I look through here, are not just things like the supplies. If you look through those line items, there's a lot of other costs that are not related to that, but just an increase.
And another thing, I mean, is this contemplating, when are we gonna start, like, when is the switch gonna flip where sewage is gonna start going across the river?
we've anticipated that in the rate study, and they've
Okay.
included that,
Okay,
and
cool.
it's still a cost, and you'll
Really?
see, yes, there's still a cost obviously associated with it, and it's,
No, we're
It's a
still in a
break.
deficit with that when it starts going over there?
I'll let Steve discuss that about, let him go through that cash flow, because I don't wanna misspeak there. I think the biggest savings to the city of Belmont was the fact that we didn't have to invest in the new wastewater treatment plant, because the costs are still gonna be similar to what we have, but we're not having to make that large investment in the new wastewater treatment plant, which has been a hefty debt payment for sure. Even things like, you'll see property and liability insurance went up. Last year it was $19,000 and now it's $47,000. So there's a lot of other things that we'll have no control of. So this is just for you all, if you're not aware of it, this dashboard on the UNC School of Government's website. It's too small probably to read that link, but I can send it to Miles and he can send that out to you all. It's really handy. You can go in, Belmont is plugged in now. You can compare us to there's so many ways to do it. You can compare us to different towns our size. You can compare us to towns with similar utility accounts. You can compare us to cities within a certain radius. So it's really helpful. It talks about our bill comparison. It shows what our bill is versus other people's. And then cost recovery, median affordability, and then it keeps going. And then this shows the health of your overall system. Each one of these speedometers, when you click on the little question mark, it'll explain to you what you're looking at. And it's not foolproof, but it obviously gives you an idea of where your system is. And moving in, this is our last slide for tonight. This is our last fund, our last piggy bank, so to speak, and it's our stormwater fund. It's similar to last year, basically the same thing. It's brought over $770,000. There is $319,000 directly directed towards capital projects. But good news on this fund, we're doing really well. This is a very healthy fund, and you have available fund balance of $1.3 million. So you really have probably close to, and we'll be adding to that at the end of this fiscal year. So you could probably spend close to $1 million in projects and still be okay. So we're working on, I know Jonathan's team is working on some cost estimates for 2 projects now. They're going to be kind of costly, so we're waiting on that. And we'll get more cost estimates, and as we move throughout the year, we can bring hopefully some projects to you for you to look at and consider. And that's all.
So I had one question, going back to the water and sewer fund and the CIP, which, as I understand it, consists entirely of the $10 million grant. Is grant the right word?
Appropriation.
Appropriation. And I noticed within the CIP in the binder, there were a number of things in orange. And if I looked at the code right, that made up the 10 million. Is that what has been recommended we do with the $10 million for those projects in orange?
You are correct.
Okay. And who is doing that recommending? I can't, was that?
This was this came out of the council retreat where we
Yes.
presented that and with the Dravenel attended.
Yes.
So those,
Okay.
the ones that are in red do equal $10 million.
Okay.
We actually talked about, could we do any more projects? What's our capacity as far as staff is concerned? Can we manage more than that in 1 year? $10 million is a big dollar amount, but there are a lot of projects in there. And we also talked about how to accomplish multiple projects at one time. And I've had a conversation with Alex here about the design build process, possibly using that to kind of move through some of the projects where you contract with a firm and then they help you to design and build the projects. So maybe we could go through that process. I'll still have to dig down a little bit deeper into it, but that's one method to accomplish multiple projects that has a big dollar figure. But, you're right, that's the state grant.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all the department heads, thank all their staff, because it takes a while to to get all this stuff together. And so I want to thank them. They did fantastic jobs of reporting, getting everything to us on time. I want to thank Jared over here, the whiz kid on Excel. Whenever I need a formula, he said, just get out of your seat and let me drive. So I do. And and I just have to plug a number in a cell, and it just does all kinds of magic. So I want to thank everybody at Miles for being so detailed and helping, get us to where we are. So we're happy with what's been presented. And as far as the model, it has been updated. We gave it to First Trine in my last audit. They've updated all those numbers. We've given our proposed budget. That's been included. So that fancy tool is ready for you, if you have any questions.
Are we gonna get the update tool?
Yeah, whatever you'd like to do, yeah.
I mean, again, and I don't know if we're gonna look at it ahead of the time before we approve this or review this for final approval, but again, I think that tool is extremely helpful because it literally helps us plan for the future in regards to this.
Would be glad, anytime to host any of you when you're available. If you want to come in, sit with myself, Miles, Jared, and just run scenarios, we'll be glad to do that, help you. There's so many things now that they have added to this that
It's gotten bigger.
it's gotten complicated, even as far as, because we've included future developments that are in there. And so today we were just looking at it, those developments were included twice because you have to turn them off each year because some of them are already included in our projected ad valorem taxes. So that's one thing. As far as also, we've made assumptions about possibly new firemen. So if you want to see what the impacts of 8 firemen, 16 firemen, we can do that, but it's, behind on pages. So it'd be easy for us to sit down and guide you through when we talk scenarios. Growth rates is something that I always want to be careful about because the value of a penny when you're plugging and changing that, you can put any number in there and plug to make it say what your target is. You just want to be careful and be conservative when you're doing that.
It's a really helpful tool, John.
It is.
Me and Mark were playing with that thing for like hours. It's pretty cool.
So quick question, water and sewer capacity study, when is that finalizing?
The capacity study is wrapping up right now.
May 6th, they'll be here to present it as well.
You talking about the capacity study on the peninsula, or you talking, that's what you're talking about? Yeah, so that's wrapping up right now. We plan to present that, I think May the 6th is the date that, we'll have the capacity study in front of you, along with, the, rate study, rate structure. So kind of both of them at the same time.
That's with us wrapping up both?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that'd be,
I think a different team though.
It's different people.
You've got folks over here that are working on the rate study, then you got some engineers that are working on the capacity study.
All right, and also, we had talked about some security enhancements for the water plant. Is that this year's budget coming out of our capital reserves, or gonna be budgeted for next year?
No, they're included inside the budget itself.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
so,
sorry. I must
we
have
don't-
missed that.
yeah, if we didn't list it inside the CIP, then it's inside the capital in the departments.
it's less than 50,000.
Yeah, wasn't it like 10 grand or something like that? Or
No, it's more than that.
It's in different places because there's some technology, there's some water and sewer, it's in like 3 different places.
Yeah, I think we had camera upgrades at, 70,000, then we had fence upgrades at like 10, and then I think some dollars at, I forget the actual dollar amount, but we have plugged all those inside this existing budget. Yes.
Okay, any other questions?
just so we could get this for the current, the pay
Yes,
schedule,
I've got that.
ahead of the approval for this, I think that would be helpful.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
So for the next steps on this, I guess, this was the draft budget presentation. If there are any changes that you all would recommend, then, of course, we want to hear them before we want to bring back, the next, iteration of this. We have a couple meetings prepared, or a couple meetings before, the actual adoption, which on our budget calendar is for the, I think, the June 3rd meeting. So you have two meetings in May. But it's balanced, it's presented, so if there's nothing else you'd like to discuss on it, then more than likely we won't make too many more, maybe small changes, of course. There's always like fine tweakings, but there's no major adjustments at this point that I'm aware of. And so the next time you see it during the May meeting will be very similar to this unless we get any kind of direction from anyone.
My only concern is that we had 2 council members not here tonight. And again, I haven't personally talked to them, I don't know if you have, about anything to do with the budget. And the only reason why I caused the concern here is because, 2 years ago, we had a budget, and then last minute, there were decisions to lower the tax rate, so there was a huge scramble from staff. They have to change last minute to make sure we get it in at the very last minute. So just want to be cognizant that we get their input for this, and it's not like the day of that we're trying to approve this.
Right, so
Is that pretty fair?
Yeah.
Well, I said we had still have a couple of meetings before final adoption.
So would you like a brief synopsis at a next meeting as well, as just similar to what we just did to catch those two up to speed, or like a scaled down version, because you're, how would you like for me to do that?
I'll leave that up to you, because that's just a call to help you guys, to you out. Because again, I don't know what their mindset is for this, so I'm just calling that out as a potential risk.
Yeah, I could, we've offered to meet with anyone one-on-one, so maybe if they want to come in and meet with staff one-on-one and give this presentation in the.
Or even, that doesn't run afoul of any open meetings laws.
Sure.
You could do 2-on-2 or whatever, like we do sometimes with the development projects.
Again, that's for y'all's benefit,
I appreciate that.
not particularly mine.
But with regard to the May meetings, I spoke with Miles about the workshop potentially moving to a different day. I have an obligation on May 20th.
What day are you thinking of?
Any day except May 20th.
Because I may also have
Yeah.
an obligation on May 20th.
Yes.
Since it's a meeting.
Yes.
You guys have your board interviews in May, just keep that in mind, so whatever you guys do, just let me know, because I've got to schedule those in advance.
But any day in May other than May 20th.
We do early May?
Yeah, sounds like you have to.
May, yeah.
I mean, if you want to do May 13th even, that would be maybe, I just can't,
No, I understand you.
Not
I
allowed
think
to.
May 13th would be okay. I don't have a crystal ball, but.
yeah. May 20th.
I know what day it is, John.
And not knowing. So we had a couple items on the May 20th. I don't have the sheet from me either. David, do you have the May 20th? There's a couple items that we were considering.
But I mean, if we did it earlier, then that would, assuming there might be any modifications, that would allow you more time for the June meeting for the budget at least.
Well, May the 20th was the workshop date, so that,
I'm gonna be out of town, it's like the 24th through the 31st.
So there's a watershed ordinance discussion with Gaston County. Transportation bond project priorities and estimates from Greg and Fleming. So I don't know if you've scheduled those two consultants.
yes, that's the one I was thinking about right there.
They've already been scheduled. Well,
Yes, but I could talk to Mike Holder. If we needed to adjust the 20th meeting to the 13th, we're meeting on the 6th, we could do it that night and say that, I think,
Yes, that would give us,
the 7 days in advance notice. So May the 6th, if everybody is good with May the 13th, we can adjust the May the 20th meeting to the 13th. But let me check with our consultants on these other projects that come up too.
Yep, that works for me.
May 13th.
Yes, sir.
and then you'd have to schedule being here early because we'll do interviews prior to for a special meeting. Unless you want to move them.
4 PM, but we like them later to allow for folks to get done with work. So we would almost need the interviews at 5, and then workshop at 6.
We can just, well, we can make it part of the, workshop, we can do a workshop, we'll just do it first.
Okay, just 5, and then, okay.
The special meeting would be for the regular meeting.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
We can do them at 5. So on the 6th, plan to be here at 5. And then normal time for the workshop on the 13th, if that works for the consultant, I guess. But Miles,
Yeah, we'll look at the calendar, I think that's fine.
So workshop's 5 PM on the 13th.
yeah, it wouldn't change. The workshop time wouldn't change as long as it works for consultant Miles.
And you're the 6th, I'm sorry, those interviews?
Yes, so you would be, instead of it starting at 5, be here at 6. That works.
It does on paper.
Tentatively.
So, yeah, we'll bring that back, quick change on the 6th that we need to.
All right, is there anything else